Needs to get. One.
Cash,
Yes.
people are unable to get into this building.
Oh dear.
The reason why it's happening, the door is
The door was propped open.
propped open, yeah. Touch it. I think I can get rid of this. Unpropped.
Yeah, I don't know why that was.
He's in charge.
It was locked, so I put a chair to keep it open.
Ah, that's.
Ah.
Keep the AC.
This is the
My
chance.
children.
Oh, that was good. They started.
Maybe. Apparently.
No.
They can pick up and start. Well, certain species. they
So it's.
2 to 3 months earlier.
Or five.
Spoken language.
Right, we have five online.
Core group
Seven.
who could 10 to 20 size. They keep making.
So the brain development.
Probably 2. I don't know. Because I already
They were-
recognize the languages. They understand that they. They can.
Yeah.
Basic things.
I'm gonna take.
Whatever. You know, core.
I was telling them.
All done. Whatever. With the size. And they start using what's good they.
I told him, well, like, Tom College, college to get out.
Work the gorilla. I mean, they're almost.
I've got a little bit of that things. I don't.
Not being rude, right?
Right. I don't wanna collaborate. Yeah, it's an object lesson. It's a let's not do this this way. please.
It's actually with the three other buildings. How can you look at
It's a classic consultant BS. It's like, let's do the track.
I was there for the first 6 weeks.
I'm not with you. I know, because I've never had that. And then.
and it's.
I
actually think the building isn't bad, but it has everything else.
Yeah, but plus it goes right up to the, that's where the whole lot, and it takes every street house that it could possibly try to live in. The front setback is 7 feet, even though our bylaws requires it.
They take it the way.
They did everything wrong.
And, so must, I've got one more week of
I had a person at this point, Jeffrey Allen, saying that maybe I should be allowed to be.
during the, I don't know, 70 days.
Amazing.
Poor
So far, I
Pierre.
haven't been any offers. And I think
So David Mark,
I'm getting old.
when Lisa sends you, does she send the
I didn't come,
Zoom information to
Tuesday, because it
Susan?
was my.
Or did she send it to both of you?
Birthday.
She knows that I opened it for Susan, but she sent it to Susan and Susan. forwarded
So
it
I
to me.
was thinking maybe we should suggest to her that
Oh.
she copied me on it from now on as the backup.
I'd like to take you through Zoom to show you the little things you're in there.
All right, hello, everyone.
I got to open it and then I said,
Sorry, I don't have a gavel.
a co-chair. and I said,
We're,
"How
we're
do you do
starting the
Yeah, I'll
meeting.
show you.
It's impossible without a gavel in that space. That's unfortunate. Welcome, everyone, to the advisory committee meeting of April 23rd, 2026. We have a few items on the agenda for tonight. Continuing our discussion of the town council budget, the building department fiscal year 27 operating budget, and then votes on warrant article, discussion and votes on warrant articles 16 and 20, the Pleasant Street zoning and the 9/11 commemoration. The order is going to be the town council budget, then Article 16, then the building department, then warrant Article 20. So if there's any members of the public who would like to make a comment about any of those items on the table, you can drop your name in the chat and we will recognize you. And if not, we will pick up our discussion of the town council's budget where we tabled it a week or so ago. There have been several questions that had been posed for which town council suggested that town administrator Carrie would be the best person to answer those questions. Town administrator has graciously arrived and has sent a number of attachments that have been posted with our agenda. So if we want to continue the discussion, I think we should pick up where we left off, which was either Christine. I'm trying to remember who the last person was who had questions for town council.
Me.
Pardon? Pardon?
Start with me.
Okay, we can start with you, and then Harry, you can navigate in the room and I'll navigate from the chat. And welcome, Chaz. Thank you for coming. And if you had anything you wanted to say to kick us off, I'd be happy to give you the floor for that.
I had a little summary that I might want to talk through, might answer some of your questions. And
Let's
what
start
might
with summary then. That sounds good.
Okay, so thank you for having me. There's been a lot of discussion about an investigation that was ordered last year, that I ordered last year, and I would like to publicly, on the record, disclose the facts that led to that investigation, relay the investigation's outcome, discuss what has happened since then, and offer what I hope is a constructive path forward. For last year's annual town meeting, the town received several complaints regarding the conduct of 5 board and commission members. Specifically, there were concerns raised that 1, advisory committee appointees improperly used public resources by engaging in photographing personnel in uniform during working time, and then using that photograph to advocate for a budget amendment. 2, a transportation board appointee acted improperly in his communications with the town's waste collection vendors and other private industry participants concerning in-house solid waste collection. 3, that same transportation board appointee's participation in advocating for the proposed amendment constituted a conflict of interest, given his familiar relationship to an involved sanitation worker. And 4, an advisory committee appointee acted improperly in communications with union personnel concerning the budget amendment. To avoid claims of political retaliation or suppressing free speech, I deferred taking any action on these issues until after town meeting. Following that, after consulting with town council's office and the Human Resources Department, I authorized the town to retain an independent investigator to determine whether applicable laws and policies, such as the town's policy against fraudulent conduct, had been violated. While the select board, moderator, and advisory committee leadership were all briefed on the decision to investigate, that decision rested solely with me. Once the investigation began, I expressly stated that the executive branch lacked the authority to discipline the advisory committee members involved. Members chose to hire private counsel, as is their right. One member claimed that the investigator had a conflict of interest because the investigator had previously worked with town council's wife and served with town council as a member of a law school alumni association. This claim was referred to the Human Resources Director, who reviewed it and determined it to be meritless. The investigation lasted longer, cost more than expected, owing in part to issues with scheduling subjects for interviews. The investigator ultimately confirmed one state ethics law violation by the transportation board member, but found insufficient evidence for the others. Nearly all investigated members remain in their roles, except for one who resigned to seek higher office. 5 investigated members are now threatening litigation, demanding reimbursement for their legal fees in the amount of $24,000. I would like you to put yourself in my shoes in the spring of last year. Complaints start to come in about the conduct of certain members of the community in powerful positions. For example, you get a complaint, someone on the advisory committee is calling union leadership and threatening them with litigation. Is that person identifying themselves as an AC member? Is that person stating or implying they will use their position in some unlawful way? Are current employees involved going along with it? I had no idea. We needed someone to investigate. But the whole issue was mired in political optics, and I knew that no matter how much I focused on the conduct, there would be a claim that I had investigated to retaliate against that person for their political views. But if I had wanted to retaliate against that person for making those phone calls, surely I would have announced that I was doing it and launched a public investigation in advance of town meeting to humiliate them and discredit their political position. Or I could have done it privately to spook them. But I didn't do either of those things. I stayed quiet so that the political process could play out. And I asked an independent investigator to gather the facts after that political process concluded, independent, so that no one could claim my views, the views of anyone on staff, had influenced the outcome. That investigator couldn't conclude that a violation of law or policy occurred in that particular instance, and that's good. The system works as it should. Advocates got to advocate. Allegations of improper conduct were investigated after the fact, and everyone was able to move on. Similarly, a member of the transportation board leaves a voicemail saying he is with that board, wants to talk about the town doing direct hauling with a sanitation subcontractor. Transportation board has no authority to negotiate such contracts. Town has no intention of entering into them. Is the board member leveraging his title for an improper purpose? Is he advocating for a position without disclosing a family member's interest in the situation? Again, I had no idea. Again, if I wanted to punish this person's speech, I would have dumped this all in a very public investigation announcement before town meeting, discredit this person and their political aims. I didn't do that because I never had the slightest intent of punishing that person's political speech. And then there was a photograph taken, DPW employees in uniform while on the clock at the transfer station. It was used to advocate for a budget thing. Initially, when I received this, my focus was on the employees. Indeed, the initial information suggested that at least one current employee had participated in taking the photograph. When someone complained to me, isn't this just like Pierce? Meaning, isn't this basically the same thing as when school employees use public resources to advocate for a ballot question? I threw up my hands and added that to the list of things for an independent investigator to look at after town meeting. I had no idea if the employees in the photograph were there voluntarily or under false pretenses. Not to belabor the point, but had I wanted to retaliate against these people, it would have been so easy. Call them out, open a public investigation, make that Pierce comparison, and embarrass them on the floor of town meeting. Instead of bringing all that up to avoid even the appearance of retaliation, I stayed quiet. The advocates have expressed a theory for why waiting until after town meeting to investigate was also retaliatory. They claim it was to vindictively punish their unsuccessful advocacy and scare them out of doing it again. Now, with all due respect to their political advocacy, their proposed amendment did not pass at town meeting. It got 70 votes, less than half the number of people who voted against it. Why would I risk my professional and personal reputation to prevent people whose political argument had just failed from failing again? The political process worked. And I have to tell you, after last year's annual town meeting, I despaired at having to open this investigation. I knew I would be attacked for it. I knew it would be a distraction from other important work that needed to be done in town. What hardened my resolve was not just this case, but the hypothetical next one. If I did nothing, then the next person who did something that warranted an investigation would say, wait a minute, why did you do nothing about the multiple potential ethics issues here, only to turn around and investigate me? Do people who are powerful and potentially litigious get a pass while the little people get the book thrown at them? Ethically, I had to follow the town's rules, regardless of what would happen to me personally. Unfortunately, the situation may have gotten more dire. My understanding that there is pattern thought that says it's not enough to sue the town or the officials in their professional capacities. My understanding that I may be sued in my personal capacity. And they will be seeking punitive damages against me that I will have to pay. They may allege that my conduct was so horribly wrong that I shouldn't be able to rely on the town to back me for doing my job. To my knowledge, I don't think an employee paid a dime of the $11 million Gerald Alston settlement, no matter how many bad decisions those employees made. So the argument would apparently be that me insisting on the rules being followed was worse. What happened to Gerald Alston, that my family should suffer the consequences. Now, if you think I'm a Machiavellian monster who radically deviated from his past record of devotion to good government, to vindictively attack the proponents of a failed budget amendment to no clear end, you may feel that this is a turnabout is fair play situation. And I am sure the investigation was uncomfortable for the claimants. I have been investigated and cleared before, and I sympathize. It's not pleasant. But an investigation has never deterred me, a reasonably hardy person, from speaking out about matters of public concern. Last time I was here, we had a robust discussion about my request for a reserve fund transfer in which the claimants participated, offering constructive feedback in many cases that I accepted. Ultimately, some voted yes, others no. I see no effects of this investigation in terms of the work being done here. But that is not to minimize the feelings of the people involved or the sympathy that I have with them. As for the cost, I don't know how $24,000 in attorney's fees was accrued in this circumstance. I wonder how much shorter and cheaper this whole investigation could have been for everyone. We just got on with it from the outset. So you will forgive me for thinking that there is a distinction between accruing attorney's fees in a situation where the town expressly disclaimed punishment and threatening town officials with personal financial ruin for trying to apply the rules fairly. What is the end goal here? If it's to get the money back, I am genuinely sorry, but it would be a bad precedent for the town to set to reimburse attorney's fees for anyone who's been the subject of an investigation, just because there was insufficient evidence to conclude a violation occurred in every instance. I understand that some folks would like to draw a distinction between appointed officials and employees, but committee members are frequently considered employees in the eyes of the law, and frankly, that's how other employees will see it. We will likely get bogged down in litigation over it. But if the goal is to have clearer rules in the future about how and whether the conduct of appointed officials can be investigated, I am fully supportive of that conversation. I will welcome any conversation of how we can revise our policies to make things clearer going forward and avoid gray areas. It would be great to see the advisory committee adopt its own code of conduct in the way that the select board has. And yes, if someone genuinely thinks their First Amendment rights were violated because of my decision, they have a right to file a lawsuit. I think they'll lose for many reasons, not least of which is because I would have done the same thing I did here, regardless of the people or the politics involved. There was never any intent to prevent anyone from speaking out or to retaliate against anyone for doing so, then, now, or in the future. And no one will find evidence to the contrary, no matter how hard they try. But if anyone's goal is to punish me for daring to follow up on potential wrongdoing and deter me from doing my job in the future, let me be crystal clear. I will never back down from doing the right thing, even if my family is threatened. I encourage everyone involved in this, including me, to step back from the brink. I am upset at this potential personal threat floating out there, and yet I acknowledge that the subjects of this investigation are very upset too. They may feel targeted and persecuted for their beliefs, and they clearly don't trust me when I say that they were not. I am willing to acknowledge that anger and mistrust, lead with empathy, and work, including through intermediaries if necessary, toward improving processes going forward, toward something that will hopefully satisfy everyone. As some of the claimants know, I've continued to communicate with them about other matters. I continue to have respect for the work that they do for this community. This latest implied threat with my family, I'm not so sure how people feel anymore. That's a whole other level of animosity. We really want this to be how things go in Brookline, because I would rather focus on making this town a better place. And I think you would too. So I hope we can discuss a more constructive way to move forward in this. And I am happy to answer your questions.
All right, I think I get to go next.
Yes, indeed.
All right. I'm not going to get into what's happened after the investigation. I'm just concerned as a member of the advisory committee with the investigation. I asked at the last meeting to have town council explain to me what the credible evidence was that was the basis of the decision to go forward with the investigation. And he told me to read the 19-page report that the investigator produced. Here is my concern with that. As I read that report, what the investigator said was, I don't find anything credible about these charges. And so it didn't answer my question, it just appalled me. Okay, I will give town council the benefit of the doubt and say that he didn't know that the charges were thin, let's call it, before the investigation was done. But it was clear that the investigator's position was, this is what happened and it didn't apply. This is what happened and it didn't apply. Okay, that tells me that there was nothing credible about that complaint. Now, all right, let's say you couldn't figure that out unless you did the big investigation. Then I look at what the core of the investigation was. And the core of the investigation, at least for 4 of the 5 people, was that they had distracted town workers for a period of time that was an hour or less on one day. Given it the best possible face I can put on that, okay, they misused $400 worth of town resources. As a member of the advisory committee, my problem with that is, how does that justify a $31,000 investigation? Okay, everything that you've cited could have been reported to the State Ethics Commission and they could have run their own investigation. And that would have been a reasonable procedure. I am not suggesting that we should not have reported conduct that we thought was inappropriate and had somebody look at it more seriously. But what I am concerned about is we're in a situation now where, because somebody theoretically misused $400 worth of town resources, we entered into a $31,000 investigation. And as a member of the Financial Advisory Committee, I have to be concerned about that. Okay, now, what happens after that? And I want to be honest with people upfront about this. The people who are advocating to keep the trash removal local instead of outsourcing it were passionate advocates. And often passionate advocates are annoying as hell. Okay, and I'll give them that. But we can't, as we have fewer and fewer resources, there is going to be more and more passionate advocacy. And we cannot do expensive investigations every time we find the advocacy annoying. And that's really what this looks like to me after I read the lovely report. And that's my concern in terms of the legal counsel's budget and in terms of the town's budget going forward. And while I recognize that they determined that a member of the transportation board probably violated the ethics rules, that again could have been handled by the state's ethics commission and should not have been investigated to this extent by us. And so one of the reasons, and I want to be completely honest about this, before I read the 19-page report, I was kind of agnostic about the whole thing. Okay, the 19-page report actually outraged me because it was so clear that, as somebody on the advisory committee pointed out earlier, this was a big nothing burger. And I do understand that we have to address these things. I'm not saying, don't address it. I am saying, let's do it in a way that is financially responsible. And I don't see this as having been financially responsible.
I understand. Thank you. May I?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I understand your position. Frankly, I agree that $31,000, that's a lot of money spent on one investigation and over these things. And that's frustrating to me. But again, I just want to focus on what was happening in that moment. And I want to talk a little bit about the other issue that you raised. The State Ethics Commission, unlike OCPF, does not collaborate with the town if a complaint is made to them. It does not release its findings one way or the other unless there is a public finding, which means that there could be a finding that there was a violation of law, but we would never know about it. I also understand that the State Ethics Commission has a significant backlog. I don't know how long it takes to get a State Ethics Commission decision. And we have this town policy on conduct, which has been around since 2011, I think, and is expressly contemplated by the state ethics law as something that the town can do. The town is allowed to have these processes. And that policy says that when something comes up, it has to be investigated. And so I would much prefer having a better system in place that doesn't necessarily need us to go to that extent. But again, the other part of this is at that time, people have asked, well, why didn't you screen the complaint? This was in the middle of a political discussion. I was advocating on behalf of DPW and the commissioner on this. If I had done it, I think we would still be here having this conversation. People would be accusing me of being biased. So I wanted to avoid even that appearance bias. I didn't want anyone to not get a fair shake. And so that was the position that I was in, trying to be as fair as possible, trying to avoid, an outcome in which someone would feel that they were, treated unfairly. But I was where I was, right? Again, think of the alternative. Think of the flip side. Then nothing. I
You could have
understand.
reported it to the ethics commission.
Again, I've explained, we have a parallel policy that says what it says. So I apologize, but that's where this is.
Neil, go on.
Yeah, thank you. Chaz, I've got a 5 or 6 item list based on your remarks in the order that they came. The question that I asked last week, and you made reference to the town's policy on fraud, which I've read. I mean, and by the way, when I read it, it sounds like they stole the truck, not took a picture of the truck, because that's the sort of embodiment of the fraud policy. But the question I asked last week that remains unanswered is by what authority does the executive policy apply to members of the legislature? I can't find it in the bylaws, and so where is it in state law?
The policy itself says it applies to everybody.
Well,
Everybody.
well, sure, and so I can say the same thing, but I don't have the authority to do it. And that wasn't my question. My question is, where is the authority? Not what the policy says, but what authority does the select board, the executive, have authority to implement its policies against members of the legislature?
Well, I would say on this, you must remember that this involved town resources. And it was an investigation.
Just with all due respect, that's not my question. Is where is the statutory authority to do the investigation? The town is not authorized to do anything it feels like. And so give me a citation that someone can look up.
I believe,
Does
I believe the town policy authorizes the town to investigate these matters, particularly where they concern town resources. And I believe, let me finish. I believe that it's fair and appropriate to give notice to the people who were involved in it. There may be a chance that over the course of this investigation, there may be a finding that they violated the law, even though there is no authority for the executive to punish those people or otherwise give them any sort of, impediment to doing their job.
so absent a difference of opinion over the facts, the law is the law, right? We don't need an investigation of the law. We have an expensive law firm on the 6th floor, right across from your office. We pay a lot of money for it, right? And so it doesn't matter what you believe, because what you believe was not my question. My question is, by what authority does the executive policy apply to the town's legislature and the members of the town's legislature?
Yeah. I think you're confusing authority and remedy. So you're making a separation of powers argument. However,
Excuse me, I'm not making a separation of powers argument. I'm asking a specific question. I'm not saying we have separate powers. I'm asking you whether the executive's authority applies to investigations and remedies against the legislature. The authority to investigate is my question. What authority do you have to investigate the legislature? Show it to me.
and that's what I'm trying to get.
I don't want to have the discussion. I just want an answer, right? That cites the law. It's not a fact question, it's a law question.
And as a government lawyer of 25 years, I can answer. If you allow,
Please, because I asked it last week and it wasn't answered.
it's the same authority that the Attorney General has to investigate state legislators. It's the same authority that the Department of Justice has to investigate members of Congress. There may be a difference in remedy. For example, there's a speech and debate clause in legislative immunity. But that doesn't take away the executive's authority to take care and enforce the law, even when you're dealing with legislators.
But what
That
is,
may go to remedy.
Joe,
what Kaz was talking
what
about.
is the, you're telling me what it is, but you're not telling me where it is. Show me where I can look it up and read it.
I will give you a site. But it's the same authority that the agency has in the Department of Justice.
Come on, this is repeating for the third or fourth time, the same authority. I want to know what the authority is. I'd like a site. And it's not like I didn't ask this question. It's not like I didn't ask the exact same question a week ago and ask for a citation. And now you're telling me you can provide a citation. So let me move to item 2. I just find it curious, Chaz, that you speak of a political process when I would have used the word legislative process. And I think it's a distinct difference. This is not a campaign that was a political campaign. This is a legitimate appropriation question and a legitimate amendment that was brought to an appropriation order. That's a legislative process. Politics is a whole different thing. It's not a dirty word, but it's a different thing. The curious question, isn't this just like Pierce? The really easy answer, the legal answer, is no. That doesn't require an investigation. That just requires an understanding of the statute. It's not just like Pierce, because I know the facts of Pierce. Pierce was a campaign finance violation based on a superintendent using a workplace computer, a workplace email, and a workplace email list to lobby in favor of campaign in favor of a ballot question. And as I read through the documents, I see campaign finance violation. It's clearly not a campaign finance violation. There is no campaign. And the use of town resources in that context, the OCPF context, applies only to campaigns. That's not a fact question, that's a legal question. The answer is, isn't this just like Pierce? Doesn't require $30,000+ of an outside investigator. It doesn't require any sort of pass off to the State Ethics Commission. It just requires a simple no. The answer to that question is no. It's not just like Pierce. And it ends there. The other question, it had to follow the town rules with no discretion. The police department exercises discretion every day over the bylaws. They stop people for traffic violations. They do all sorts of things. They can charge misdemeanors. They don't, but they can. And in some cases, maybe they do, right? There's no discretion. Zero, you have no discretion. It's automaton. Really, that's not acceptable. My last, no one was out of pocket in the Alston case. I can't tell you how many years Stanley Spiegel, former town meeting member and advisory committee member, long-term advisory committee member, he had to fight with the select board for reimbursement of his legal fees, where the select board continuously refused to indemnify him and hold him harmless. That was a fight that went on for an exceedingly long time, right? And I won't go into the details other than it took significant effort by counsel. Oh, and by the way, Brooks Ames was sanctioned for naming Stanley as a defendant in that case. He was sanctioned and awarded a sanction reward, whatever you want to call that. And then the town tried to take that and offset the amount of legal fees. And that was yet another fight Stanley had to make. And eventually he prevailed. Was he out of pocket at the end of the day? No. Was he an absolute mental wreck for much of that time? Yes. Right. And so I cite the notion that no one went out of pocket. No one went out of pocket, perhaps because they're indemnified and held harmless because they are volunteers in our government, right? And the sort of scheme of volunteer for government is that this stuff doesn't happen to you. This stuff doesn't happen to you because you don't have to worry about taking a picture, right? And ending up spending $24,000 because the town says, oh, you're being investigated. And what you did may be a crime. Really?
Thank you. Carlos.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Chas, for being here. I apologize for myself, at least, that this has snowballed into what it has. And I think that's one of the issues that I have with it, is that it was a pretty simple incident at the beginning. And again, it snowballed into $34,000 in study and expenses for the town and whatever other expenses for town meeting members and all these meetings that we're having. I, like Neil, I don't understand a couple of things. I was reading the policy against fraudulent conduct, misappropriation, and corruption. That was adopted by the board of selectmen and the school committee. Except for one of the members, the rest of the members were part of a board that is appointed by the moderator. So I'm also having trouble sort of seeing where the difference is, or why it applies to the legislature. You mentioned that there was an employee that also took the pictures at that time. Is that something that came up to be true, or is that something that was not true?
You can see in the footnote to the report that that employee was cleared, because that employee very quickly came in, sat down for an interview, and gave credible evidence to the investigator, saying that he was not involved with that.
Right.
And so,
So again, that was put on the footnote, which I think is sort of a strange way of doing it, but also that would have, as you just mentioned, it was quickly resolved that an employee hadn't been part of it. So then we're talking about the 5 town meeting members that were there, and I believe they were there before the day started, correct?
I'm not sure, I have to look back at the report.
Okay, that's what was mentioned last week. So I also don't understand necessarily if it was during town work or time, employee time. But the part that just drives me nuts is what has been not only today and last week, but also throughout the report and also throughout the subcommittee meeting. The whole idea that OCPF has anything to do with this. There's no campaign.
Campaign finance.
There's no campaign. There's just not even a way of throwing the campaign in there. And there have been examples where, yes, photographs and photographs with employees, one thing or not, have been used in ballot campaigns by both town meeting members, staff, and others, which we haven't really complained about too much. I mean, we've complained when it has been for the ballot question or for the election, but then when it went to town meeting and the slideshows were showing this for the budget or for town meeting to vote on that budget amendment, of that budget change, it's never been an issue. So that's another part I don't understand. And then, yes, I do agree that, maybe there was one of the people investigated that should have thought better about how ethical it was to represent themselves either the way they did or, having a family member that works for the town. But again, I think that would have been resolved by the ethics commission, sending it to the ethics commission. I believe other people investigated were also thought to have a family member as part of that, but I don't think it was clear that family member hasn't been a family member for years now. So it's unclear where how the family member part applied to more than one person, and therefore, since that is something that you don't need an investigation to find out if it applies to more than one person, it would have simplified the investigation to start with. Maybe we could have just said, this applies to one person, and it should have gone to the ethics commission, and it would have cost, I don't know, $600 for investigating that, 3 hours, whatever it is. So those are my thoughts. And again, when you take that and then you see where we are now, you can see that first decision should have been thought deeper, with a deeper thought, so that we don't get to the snowball that we're now.
I will just say, that I think it's important, to talk about, I agree with you, OCPF is a different body, different campaign finance law. This is not a campaign finance position. The ethics law, it is chapter 268A, section 23B, 2I, as interpreted by the State Ethics Commission, says in part, public employee will not engage in political activities that are election related or non-election related on his public work time while acting in his official capacity and while in his official uniform in a public building, except where equal access for political activity, or with the use of other public resources, such as staff time, public office space and facilities, public office equipment such as computers, copiers, and communications equipment, etc. And so there is a parallel, comparable rule based on the conflict of interest law that has the same impact for public employees in non-campaign related situations. And that was the focus of that inquiry. It's not, so the complaint isn't this just like Pierce? The answer to that is no, because it's not an OCPF related matter. But there is a parallel ethics that applies to public employees when it relates to things that are not affecting it. So that
Right, but who were the public employees?
the advisory committee members are considered public employees
Under the state of
under the state ethics law. I will also note that they were employees who were the subject of the photograph. We're also going to as part of this, conflicting statements about what had happened here. So it wasn't clear to me what the evidence was, who was involved, how many people were involved, what was going on. That is, there was a lot of uncertainty at the outset of this. And I think too, right, hindsight is what it is. I understand. I do think that it's unfortunate that we are here talking about a large bill. I don't think that that's good for the town. And that's why I am interested in thinking about ways to make this better in the future, make this not happen in the future. Clear rules and regulations about how investigations are conducted, by whom, and what can be done up in front. But when you look at what was known at the time, consider a counterfactual. Consider a counterfactual where there was a serious violation of this law that's happening. And again, I ducked it. I didn't know enough about it, but I left it alone. Left it well enough alone because I was afraid that I would be sitting here at this table answering questions from people. If I had done that,
because at the end, for a lot of town meeting members, I think the question is going to be like, if I campaign it or not, if I'm pro something in a budget amendment and I'm very sort of strong about it, am I going to be investigated? And that's what the message is, because I would have just dropped it after, it passed. I would just drop it. And by continuing to investigate after the amendment failed and the complainants, the people had lost, I think that was enough to just leave it alone.
I understand that position. I thought about that. I had conversations with people about it. And I will tell you that just as a matter of personal preference, to leave well enough alone, that was enticing to me. But ultimately, like I said, what made the decision for me was this idea that you duck this, look away, you decide to exercise your discretion, not do this. The next time something happens, you will not have a leg to stand on. You will be told that you ducked it because you were afraid, afraid of the consequences, afraid of your personal reputation being dragged in mud. And
Well, I don't know if it's your personal, I mean, I think it's a representation of the whole thing, but at the end, after $34,000, it basically, it was a nothing burger.
But I didn't know that we would be spending $34,000 on this investigation. My hope when we did this was that it would be over in weeks.
So that's another question I have. Were you up to date? Like,
were there milestones where you could say, we're spending this much, and at one point to say, I think we spent enough, we haven't gotten anywhere, we should just drop it?
I walled myself off largely from the investigation, right? I did not control the investigator. I did not direct the investigator. I didn't do any.
Susan Granoff.
Unmute myself. Thank you, Chaz, for showing up. I'm sure this is not your favorite place to be spending an evening, but I'm very concerned about the long-term effects of this investigation on the functioning of Brookline's government, and in particular, the message it is sending to the legislative branch. One of the key aspects of what the advisory committee does is to be able to question all of the decisions that are being made that impact the expenditures of the town. We are the watchdogs, the financial watchdogs of the town. In order to perform our function, we have to be able to ask questions of town employees. This is the essential way that we reach our recommendations. We can't simply take assertions that people give that they need this amount of money or this warrant article is needed without our being able to question the staff, the town employees. Normally they're department heads, but sometimes not, about the actual situation. And if we have to start second guessing ourselves about this essential function, then that's going to have a chilling effect on what we do. It will also have a chilling effect on town meeting members, because both town meeting members and advisory committee members typically have to probe and ask hard questions if they're going to be able to make really informed decisions. Going on field trips to sites have frequently in the past been ways of gathering information. So the appearance of people at the DPW place was not something unusual. It has happened in the past. It has happened, sometimes they're organized by other groups for us to come out, but sometimes we simply do that in the course of our jobs. And that's expected. If we're actually doing our job correctly, we should be doing that. So I'm concerned that now people are going to be second guessing whether they should even be doing what by rights and by, according to the bylaws, we have a responsibility to do in order for us to weigh in not only on the budgets of each department, but also on making recommendations for every warrant article and every matter that goes to before town meeting. We have to be able to feel that we don't need special permission to ask questions. And I know that an issue has come up about a photograph. When I hold a public hearing on a department, it's not unusual for the department head to come to our meeting with photographs of employees, showing us how they're functioning and what they're doing. I don't see a real difference between that and between getting a picture of DPW workers at work in their site. It's a way of gathering information. It was not used to support a candidate. It was not used to endorse a particular policy. It was simply to show the background. These are the people who are going to be affected by a decision that you're going to be making. It humanizes it, and it helps people understand the serious decisions that they're making. So I'm I am concerned that the decision not to use a method such as the State Ethics Commission, but to actually go in a big guns kind of approach by hiring a law firm to conduct a very expensive analysis. And I read the document that you presented, their report that you sent to us, and a lot of the time and space of this investigator was spent finally realizing the role that's needed to, as an advisory committee person and as a town meeting member, to ask questions. And if someone had bothered speaking to Dennis and Harry at the beginning, perhaps that could have been clarified so that that whole aspect that seemed to be calling into question whether people were stepping outside of their roles in as part of the government could have been eliminated as an issue. Whoever made the complaint clearly didn't fully understand the role of the advisory committee and its members and of town meeting members. And if in fact people on the sixth floor don't understand that, then I think we have a deeper problem, because I think it's very important that the legislative branch of our government not feel that the executive branch purposely is trying to create a chilling atmosphere where we're not encouraged to ask questions, because then the people who will suffer most will be the residents of Brookline, because we will not be able to provide them with the kind of government that we should be providing in a healthy democracy. So I would really urge you to reconsider the policy that you seem to feel is almost etched in stone, that if there's any kind of a complaint, you have to go out and spend a lot of money on hiring a major law firm who normally, as someone who has been in various firms, they always start out with looking at the worst case scenario and looking at charges that could involve the worst types of charges and having really consequential outcomes to the people who are being charged. And then they're put in a position where they almost have to hire attorneys. Because if you're going to be charged with something that has the potential of being a felony with jail time, how can you not hire an attorney? And then the other result of that is that it's going to discourage people from participating in our town government if they don't really if they're not wealthy enough to be able to just hire attorneys if they run into any sort of difficulty such as this again. Many of the members, even of the advisory committee, don't have a lot of money. Some of us really are trying to do our part in helping our government, but we don't get paid anything. And we apparently now have a huge, the possibility of being, having to hire attorneys every time we make a decision or decide to call up someone, a town department head or a superintendent, and ask questions. And that would seem to me sending the wrong message. I'm sure a lot of this is unintended. I'm not accusing anyone of purposely doing this, but I do think it reveals a misunderstanding of the role of the legislative body of Brookline and how we actually function. And I hope that we can have, perhaps this needs to be taken up in some sort of study committee, but I think that we need to have more consideration about enabling us to do our jobs, just as I'm sure you want to be able to do your jobs. But part of being able to do your job is to be able to have, to be prepared to answer the questions that the advisory committee or town meeting members may have, particularly when they involve the expenditures of town revenues. And so I hope that will be taken into consideration when looking at the lessons that we're learning from this incident. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Can I just respond to that? It's okay. May I respond to this?
Yes.
I just want to say, Susan, one, thank you. I agree, I think almost with everything you said. I think there are a few issues on the facts that are not really important. I think the overarching tone of your comment and structure of your comment is exactly right. You are an oversight body. And you should not feel chilled from oversight. And if the result of this is that people are feeling in that way, while I'm doing my best to explain the predicates that led up to this, the issues that led up to it, the policies, the interlocking things, what we didn't know, all of that stuff. If the practical result of that is that policies need to change, I am all in favor of that. I am happy to have that conversation with you all. I think as a committee is a great idea, honestly. I'm not afraid of oversight. In fact, I think sometimes the advisory committee does a better job than staff does in identifying simple solutions to problems that are often we are so close to that we don't see. There is a real valuable role for this committee. That's why it's your budget, right? It was never my intent, and never anyone's intent to chill the oversight function of this committee. And I think as you've seen during this budget process, which has been contentious. I mean, I go back to that reserve fund transfer. There were pointed questions asked about the authority, whether or not it's appropriate, whether or not all of those things. And that's good. That's as it should be. I'm not afraid of a hot bench. I'm not afraid of tough questions. And I don't think anyone on staff is. So I really want to rebuild, to the extent I hear the concern from all of you on this. So I want to rebuild that trust, rebuild that ability to say, we acknowledge the advisory committee's role in oversight. It's never our intent to chill it. It's never our intent to do anything untoward in that regard. It's solely responding to these issues, which were credible allegations, potential violations, and ultimately, fortunately, many of them were found to be unsubstantiated. We didn't know a lot of that stuff prior to the investigation. So thinking about a way to structure this so that there are clear expectations for us when it comes to appointed officials, and clear expectations for appointed officials when it comes to that conduct, I think would go a long way to avoiding these issues in the future.
Thank you. The lead Caterpillar.
I'm just going through and editing my questions here. So first I want to acknowledge that scary feeling that I think that you were addressing in your opening statements. I think given what you shared, my colleagues and I can certainly understand what that feels like. And to that end, I think you can also empathize with my colleagues of the position that they were in when they were faced with the possibility of 5 years jail time for doing something that they were doing to help our community. To that point, I have a couple of questions for you. My first is, I'm hoping you can answer for me your reasoning behind not going to the state, given where we're at now with both the fear on my colleague's part and certainly your part for your family, just letting a third party go through and do the investigation. And forgive me if you addressed that early on. A colleague of mine and I had to be in the subcommittee meeting early on. And then the second part, I was also hoping that you might be able to answer this for me, and maybe town council can help you do this. I'm going to turn my computer around. Just as an example, I'm having a hard time reconciling this. I happened to find this doing research for something entirely different. And I'm happy to bring it to
You want to share your screen?
actually see.
Yeah, why don't you
Oh,
share
can I?
your screen? So
Yeah.
Do I-
Dennis, can you make her a co-host?
One second.
Wait, does this mean I have to log into the Zoom?
Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
can do that. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's why I couldn't find you.
Back to the agenda.
Can I just send this to somebody who's already in the Zoom?
Send it to Dennis.
Okay.
She'll send it to you.
I'm sending it to you,
Post,
Dennis.
Yep.
Okay, that's just that. So while he's pulling that up, I'm just curious, so I was doing separate election work for my own background reasons, research, all that stuff, and I came across this image. And I was just wondering how an image like this can be utilized and that person not be sanctioned. And then the one that was presented to us at town meeting could be. Because this seems overtly political to me. And again, when this whole thing went down, this was my very first town meeting, so please forgive me if there are things I am somehow missing.
Who posted this?
So this was on Medium. And this was Brookline Equity Coalition, and this was in May 18th, 2023.
Okay.
Um,
So I don't know who's on the Brookline Equity Coalition, but they're not a town entity.
they're not.
No.
But there are Brookline town meeting members who I think work with.
On
that
their
coalition.
board.
On their board.
And on their board.
Are there any advisory committee members or are there special government employees on that? board?
Yes, I
Yes,
guess so.
there are. Yes.
But if it's on
was gonna
behalf of
say,
the
I don't
equity
know,
committee,
but-
not on behalf of the advocacy board, as opposed to in their,
Could you speak up, please?
so if it's on the, website of the Brookline Equity Coalition, then that's like an employee, in their union capacity. So you have multiple capacities.
Mhm.
So they could have used that in their capacity on behalf of that advocacy group as opposed to on their capacity as a public official.
And the other thing there is, I don't think that picture looks like the exterior of Pierce, right? There's no employees in it. There's no resources that weren't otherwise available to the general public for that photograph.
But
You
it
know,
looks like
what-
the old front entrance and or parking entrance.
Right,
here,
which is open to the public.
which was open to the public, but I only use this as I'm not a lawyer. I only use this as a point, as someone who's new to town meeting and to better understand my role and how I can represent the people who email me. How do I know when I'm not crossing the line, when I'm doing something where I'm advocating for my community and I truly think based on what I'm being emailed, the people I'm talking to, that I'm not doing what's best in that moment. And then suddenly somebody comes to me and says, actually, you crossed a line somewhere and now you might be serving 5 years in jail.
I mean,
It's a frightening prospect.
I understand. I absolutely sympathize. I understand. I think the issue here is, right, that question of use of public resources and the ability to access them, the ability to deal with that. I mean, I go back to Susan's comment, for example. One of the things that she mentioned was, it's a photograph of people, it's a photograph to demonstrate losing, et cetera.
Mhm.
It's my understanding that at least one of the people in that photograph didn't want to be in that photograph. And in fact, was not advocating on behalf of staying in sanitation. Absolutely hated being on sanitation and would be happy to see the back end of it. And his image was being used to advocate for a position that he did not want to be advocating.
So there wasn't like a release signed.
But that's my knowledge.
Okay.
But again, this is all, in the ether, stuff that we didn't know, right?
Mhm.
What's going on here? What's going on here? It's not clear. It was not clear to us at the beginning of this, what was happening, or even who was involved, right? We had this employee out there, this kind of, weird third dimension to it, where we just didn't have the facts. When you don't have the facts seem unclear. You can do one of two things. You can say, well, I'm gonna pass on it, or I'm gonna look into it. And I think in this instance, looking into it, given what we had on in front of us was really the only kind of ethical decision we could make under those circumstances. To talk about your issue about the State Ethics Commission, two issues with the State Ethics Commission were, one, unlike OCPF, which has a more collaborative relationship, and when those issues arise, they work with the town to identify violations. The State Ethics Commission does not tell the town the results of their investigations. The only way that the town would learn if you have a violation is if it were of such a magnitude that it warranted some sort of public outcry. Most of the time, that's my, I don't know, most of the time, some of the time, what the State Ethics Commission doesn't tell you what the result of investigation was. And it also, my understanding is that process takes a long time. My hope, ironically, was that in getting someone from the town, that it would take shorter than that we would just be done with it. That we could move through this, get an understanding of what happened, and move on from it. And again, my hope was in bringing in an independent investigator that they would feel confident that it wasn't me or someone at DPW going after them for their political beliefs, but that we were taking this seriously and taking this fairly, making sure that we were not, trying to be vindictive. It would make no sense to be vindictive, but trying to get to the bottom of something that had happened that had there were credible allegations of a potential ethics violation.
So I hear you on that point. And again, this is probably my novice space in this, but I hear you on that. But it's that exact line that I have trouble reconciling because of how close these bodies of government are together and who was specifically involved. And I'm just struggling, and I don't think you're evading the question or anything like that. I'm just struggling to hear an answer, I think, for myself about how you went about this decision that wouldn't be the state commission going through this, because this would then have prevented you being in this position and certainly feeling like your family was a part of this, and then certainly the legislative body being a part of this and feeling like their own government was coming back on them.
I think the other aspect of this, right, is there's this parallel town policy, and that's what I think we need to work on.
Okay.
Because there is this parallel town policy that says that these things shall be investigated, right? And it's very, to Neil's point, right? It's a stern reading policy. It has pretty.
To all due respect, it doesn't define the investigation. I'll get to my comments in a minute, but it does not define the investigation. No one is saying ignore complaints. And I'll wait my turn.
Well, I do just want to underscore, it does, I think what I was trying to get at is that it does give us a better sense of what that thought process was in that day of work, in that process, or those series of days of work when the decision was being made. So that's all I was getting at, is I was trying to better understand what that was. I'm not taking a position for or against, but I did want to better understand your workday process in this.
Like, first, I'll do Lisa's concern about how do you know when to cross the line? I'm sorry, when so you don't cross the line, please call my office. My number is 617-305-1525. Send me an email. If I don't get back to you, call me. Jonathan Simpson has been taking the lead during this campaign, season in answering the questions. He's answered dozens of people. Now on medical school vacation, and I've gotten 3 in the only couple of days he's been on vacation. We want you to make sure you don't run into problems. And we are familiar with both OCPF regulations and also ethics division. So I hear, you should have known this doesn't apply to OCPF, but we also know that there's a layer of ethics division. So we're trying to make sure everybody, town meeting members, candidates, advisory committee members, employees, stay within the law. Jonathan's done trainings, we answer questions. So to allay your concerns about how do you know not to go over the line, if you have any doubt, and I say this to all the people all the time, all my office, we're happy to answer your questions.
So I did email your office and I got a response from them. And I think that leaves the law to be up for interpretation to some extent, because I created a public program, a community conversation where this would allow residents to actually talk with municipal staff to hear their perspective, not for or against, not in their uniforms, not with or presenting their titles, but just this is what our jobs are on the front line every day. And if we don't have this X number of dollars, then yeah, we can't do our jobs here, or we can't do our jobs there, or this is what it looks like. And I was told we can't have that conversation, that was a violation, which of course I pulled.
But I believe Jonathan gave you other options, so.
No, he didn't. He said, if you have any more questions, you can write me back. The only other option I was given was to reach out to other
Right.
municipality employees,
Exactly.
but there wasn't a list of options for our residents to actually talk to town employees.
And unfortunately, sometimes, we have to explain to people the idea that they have.
Yeah,
To get to, A, B might be illegal. So I pride ourselves on trying to make sure that people have options. If you want to do A, B, and we tell you that's illegal, we usually try to say, but you can do A, C, B, A, C, D, B. We try to give you options and not just saying no. Sometimes though, people's ideas that they think it would be simpler are illegal, because it's always more complicated to comply with the law. It's more expensive, it's longer, more complex, absolutely. But that's unfortunate consequence of the law. So you might think like it would be easier if we could do this. Yes, it might be easier, but if it's illegal, you shouldn't. So we try to give you options to do it legally. Understanding it's more complex, more expensive, longer. But our concern is making sure it's legal.
Thank you. Janice Khan.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Chess, for being here. And I want to thank Susan for saying just about almost everything I was going to say. I want to bring you back to, again, the work of the advisory committee. I mean, we are the finance committee. Our job is to do a deep dive into the way money is spent in this town. And really what's remarkable to me is the amount of research that this group of advisory committee members actually did in analyzing the cost of this to the town, not just the present, but also thinking about future costs. And to put that in perspective, for those of us who've lived in the town a really long time, DPW has seen the greatest shrinkage of any department in this town. It is maybe a third the size it was when I moved here 40 years ago. And a lot of that has been due to privatization. So it's an issue that is taken really seriously by long-term residents of the town. It wasn't like a one-off, suddenly we're looking at privatization. We've watched this happen in this department gradually to many aspects of it. It's a huge division, and many of the divisions have seen this privatization, whether it's parks and open space. It's not just this. So that when this issue came before us, I think it deserved a really deep analysis, as opposed to some other issue that may not have had that much of gravitas for us in the town. And so I really I support what Susan's saying, that the work that is done in this committee is really substantial and really valuable. And often we're not seen as contributing the value that we actually provide to the town free of charge. An occasional slice of pizza maybe, or a sandwich. But
In your budget, it's mostly pizza.
mostly pizza, yeah, and we cover pizza budget this year, so there you go. But so, I want to really emphasize the fact that we need to have a better relationship with the sixth floor about the work that we do so that this doesn't happen again. This was, I don't know if you really looked at all the work that was done, all of the analysis that was done. It was quite extraordinary. And really, the people who've been sort of punished for it really should be lauded for the amount of time and effort they took to really do a very, very deep dive into an area of great concern to the town long term. Privatization has always been an issue. We know that over time it costs more. We have less and less control over costs when we farm it out. And so this is one area that 2 or 3 commissioners before had been really cautious about and really told us to be cautious about, to over privatizing this particular function. Even though it's been eroding over time from, well, you've seen what's happened. But anyway, so I really just want to put a plug in again for, for really understanding the value that we do give to the town and really supporting us rather than suing us for the work that we're doing.
And,
And I know it wasn't a suit, it was an investigation.
and I'll just add to that, one of the things that I've tried to do to build that better relationship is I meet regularly with Dennis and Harry and whoever is the subcommittee chair if there's an issue coming up, which I understand didn't happen in the past. I've instituted that we present to you. I've tried to be a much more interactive process with the forecast in December and with the budget. I do recognize and really appreciate the role you provide here, which is why I think this conversation is so painful. Because I don't want you to feel that I don't respect the work that you do. I don't respect the work that those people did. Did I disagree with it? Yes, absolutely. But disagreement is not grounds for an investigation. And I was very, very adamant in making that clear throughout everything that I did. That my personal disagreement with their position was no grounds whatsoever for the actions that we ultimately wound up taking. They knew that the interpreted that way, and I've worked very hard to demonstrate that that is not the case. And I think hearing from you all tonight, it's clear that we need to do more to build out a process where your oversight role is clear, clarified, and respected by the executive branch.
And I think that your role also is bigger than that, Jess, because in this case, we're presuming it was a complaint by staff. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. But your role, it would be better for you to bring all the parties together to have a conversation rather than to hire an outside investigator to do work. That we can, I think, accomplish more within the town to better outcomes if we have these conversations.
Thank you. I just want to read, since the people here at the table don't all have access to the chat. Susan Granoff wrote in, the Massachusetts State Ethics Commission will release their findings publicly if they find reasonable cause to believe a violation has occurred, as well as their final decisions, orders, and agreements. Enforcement actions, decisions, and orders are public records, but their preliminary investigations and complaints are kept confidential until there is a final determination. I'm going to hit people on the list who have not yet spoken, so this is going to be a little out of order. Fran Perlin.
So, Chaz, appreciate things, you're being here. And I have a bunch of things I wanted to ask. But the first thing is that just as you have expressed how this is affecting you potentially personally, I think other people have felt that. But I also want to hear not Chaz's point of view, but town administrator's point of view. So I thought I understood this whole thing about photographs, but now I'm totally confused. So last year I had a warrant article about Newbury West and the senior center wanting some time, some space there. And I took pictures, because everyone knows I take pictures of everything. And staff were in the pictures. I visit the senior center an awful lot. I take pictures of it, and staff are in the pictures. In the case of Newbury, I'm not sure, I may or may not have put up one of those pictures during my presentation of the warrant article. Am I breaking the law?
No.
Why not?
You're not taking pictures of people you're taking pictures of people in a public space. You're not posing those people. You're not asking them to be in.
I'm posing them. You haven't seen me take pictures.
And so even if you're posing them, you're members of the public, or you're in a public space.
Well, no, like staff, like members of the Council on Aging, et cetera.
You don't have to,
Director,
yeah,
Emily.
I'd have to take a look at that. I don't know.
Yeah. So can you, so I think we need a clear definition of what is legal, what isn't, because I'm totally confused.
And also public space. If you want to use photos in a political campaign like that, get my office call.
Well, it's a town meeting warrant article. Is that a political campaign?
You should give us a call.
Can you answer now?
I would rather have Jonathan Simpson answer, since he's most up to date on these issues this campaign season, but he is on vacation since this is April school vacation. But Memorial Friday these are fact intensive inquiries, so I don't want to say yes or no. There needs to be a conversation which we ask questions. Is this something that was created before that you're just grabbing from the public domain and using? Is it
No, I'm telling you, I'm taking pictures.
we need more information than you're just taking pictures. So I suggest you give Jonathan Simpson a call next week.
Okay, well, I would request that your office gets a policy that simple people like me, who are only poor scientists and not lawyers, can understand. The second thing sort of is said by a lot of other people. I worked in industry for a long time. And personally, I'm a very practical person. I like getting to a solution and not being part of the problem. In industry, if we had an incident like this, HR would sit down with people and do a preliminary investigation. That I understand that there seems to be this black and white that you're saying, either we do nothing or we hire outside counsel. And I've never seen an organization where it's that black and white choice. And there isn't the, let's sit down and explore, get a little bit more information and go ahead. And I wonder if this whole mess would have been not brought forward if that were occurring. I also sat at those meetings and saw how upset everyone was about the fight of should we outsource and should we not, and who has the right to make that decision. So I think the emotions were quite high. And after waiting until town meeting was over, one would have hoped that emotions would have gone down. I personally don't understand how anyone in your position or in the legal position or in the select board can expect anyone in this committee or in town meeting not to look at this as retribution, whether it is meant that way or not. And you know as well as I do, you have a wonderful newsletter. You know what optics are. The optics of this are terrible. And I think it's really unfortunate because I don't think you want those optics to be the relationship. So, as a simple person, how would I solve this? Well, it's true that the Gang of Five, you know, are threatening this whatever lawsuit. But it's also true that they said, if you just pass for our lawyers, we'll be fine. And it seems to me that it would be a nice gesture from the town to prove that it wasn't retribution, to prove that you respect the work that people do, to just pay them the $24,000. You spend more on paper clips than that. And just say, you know, maybe there was a lot of things that didn't go the way they should have in this. And, you know, you want to make nice. That would be how I would solve that kind of problem if it happened in my lab when I was working. You know, because there's the rules and there's the optics and there's the morality of what is right and what isn't. And I sat here when we met last time, and Attorney Callahan said that, well, they didn't have to hire a lawyer. You know, it's their fault they spent $24,000 on lawyers. And I thought that was one of the more disingenuous things I've ever heard. Because if you're sitting down with somebody who's sending, as you said, just the way you feel intimidated by your family being named, these people faced felonies. And to tell them, well, you didn't have to have a lawyer. I mean, tell me any lawyer who would tell a client that with a straight face. So, you know, you can repair a lot and put it all to sleep by doing the kinds of things that Susan suggested with a committee to communicate. Just stop the whole thing. Pay them $24,000. It's in your petty cash. Sorry.
Thank you, Fran.
Well said.
So I'm gonna call on all the people who are on the list, but given the time,
Respectfully.
I'm gonna ask that you keep your comments as brief as you can, without not saying things you need to say. Michael Berger.
I'll say no more. I thank you, Chaz, for tonight. This meeting reminds me of a meeting we had when the issue of privatization of sanitation first came up, and it was very tense. And many on the committee here were very surprised on the proposal. So I concur with the proposal to form a working body to work this out, but not only on oversight. I think one of the things that the advisory committee takes as our charge is not just oversight to say that's not right. It's actually to develop policy. So if there's going to be a committee, I think it would be very important. If the DPW were looking at privatization, is to involve a representative from the advisory committee to sit on that committee and give you. And I think that would be
Financial?
financial. Yeah,
Okay,
that's what
not executive income, financial.
right. Financial input, right. So I think that would go a long way to transparency. I think transparency is not just, we're not give a stamp that it's that if check mark, we vote for it or we don't. This is why, but help in developing the policy too, because there's a lot of expertise. All the hours that you spend in our backwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa, did you have you were kind of going.
Well, one of my things was in response.
If the answer is no, I have nothing more.
No, unfortunately, I do.
Make it brief if you can.
Okay, so I'm not sure which committee you're referring to, but I had a few general questions about how things proceed with investigations and how those might be things that should also be answered in a committee to set up how to deal with complaints, which I think is different from the committee that you were talking about. I thought that's what we were talking about. So when we have complaints about a public employee, is there a best practice that we currently do, which is to hire an outside investigator instead of going to the state ethics committee? And I'm wondering that because you had said you have to treat all cases the same.
Yeah.
And I could understand you hiring the investigator if for some reason the ethics commission is something we never do or rarely do. So that was my first question and something that might be relevant for a committee to discuss.
I don't recall the situation since I've been here where we have involved the state ethics commission. Investigations into this sort of thing are very rare. And they either in the Pierce case, then there's OCPF involvement. The only other incident I'm aware of that happened during my tenure was an issue with a candidate for select board posing with a police officer in uniform, posting that picture to Facebook as part of a political campaign. When that happened, the facts were not in dispute. The officer admitted to exactly what happened. There was no question of fact. It was also before I started sending out that email to all employees reminding them, don't do that. And they pleaded ignorance of law. And the solution to that was, because this was a political campaign, but the officer said, quote, we would do this for anyone. I said, then you need to make the offer to do that for anyone involved in the campaign currently. If they want to go right along with the police officer and take a photograph of them, that's what you need to do, to offer them that outlet. So in that instance, there was no dispute as to the facts. There was a dispute as to the issue and the use of that. The State Ethics Commission wasn't involved because there was no need for a fact-finding investigation, just provided the remedy there. That's the only other time that I've seen an issue involving this section of the law.
So it always.
We've done other ethics investigations, both internal and external. We do not involve the Ethics Commission because as town council, you have a safe harbor, and I say it's not a violative of ethics, even if the Ethics Commission disagrees. So it was almost inconceivable to me that I would suggest you go to the Ethics Commission. It would be better handled here. So for example, in this circumstance, if it went to the Ethics Commission, the Ethics Commission could have done a public education letter or finding or sanction or anything like that. We're here, even though there was a finding of an ethics violation, it was not public and took no action. I cannot guarantee that in the Ethics Commission if you just turn this investigation over to the state.
So, yeah, anyway, so I don't know. So maybe you have a policy in place for that. With regard to photographs as a public resource, it seems to me that now there may be something if we apparently try to get people to do something that are employees that they didn't want to do, that's a whole other issue. But it seems like taking photographs to document something, that's to me evidence that is provided and not using public resources kind of from a procedural point of view. For example, what happened with the school principals for Pierce, they used town resources to express their views. And this is just I thought it was just taking a photo as evidence that here we have workers who were available. So that's how I would distinguish that. So it seems like evidence is being confused with using the tools of government to get your communication through. That I could be right or wrong on that. But in any case, it also seemed like it was such a minor issue. And as people have kind of mentioned, I'm wondering, was there discussion with the complainant at all about what are they seeking? Is there a way to resolve it in a more accommodating way? What are the goals? Or is there just an assumption someone comes with a complaint and I can understand your dilemma about you can't ignore complaints, but what steps are taken before the complaint? Are there steps that we can take before the complaint goes to the next step to a larger investigation? What? How do you validate it? Validate it, well, yeah, I mean, that's something. But who knows what the agenda was, as you've mentioned before. But I think the bigger issue when Janice talked about the advisory committee and how our role is to do policy and question policy. I think this is an issue for anyone who's in a position to deal with policy, that there's going to be different people who are not happy with your policy positions. And I'm saying that from my own experience.
Yes.
I was investigated, and I think it was because my policy did not agree with theirs. And I think because all of us are at risk of investigation, and if there's no way of knowing, like when Elise said, how do I know? You might be totally innocent, but they'll file a complaint anyways because they don't agree with you. So how do we protect people in these circumstances if it turns out that, yes, this was really quite frivolous a complaint, but we felt obligated to investigate it. And that's what leads me to, should we have a policy on indemnification if it is found that the people were, that if there's a complaint against someone and it turns out that it is for policy reasons and not for a really substantive complaint, that there should be some kind of protection that everybody in a policy-making position can have. And I think that would lead to at least to some extent, for me, to some reimbursement for attorney's fees. For the circumstances which seemed clear that there really wasn't much of the case, but that nonetheless forced people to have to hire attorneys to document that.
Thank you. Lisa,
It's short,
you have short two
very short,
finger.
just a two finger on this point. When you were referencing not going to the state for privacy reasons, wasn't there a moment where these 5 individuals were exposed during the select or in the select board agenda? And what makes that confusing is there's a sitting select board member who is a part of this decision for the reimbursement, who is running for reelection. And one of the people who were investigated is also running for reelection. So there is just this compounding of knots here that make this feel really unethical in a lot of different ways. And also makes it feel like they weren't protected anyway. So there's no barrier of protection for anyone.
The reason why those folks were on the select board's agenda was because they sent a letter saying we'd like to be reimbursed for our attorney's fees, which is a public demand. And the only way for the select board to address that is to deal with it in an executive session.
Yeah,
So that's what it was.
but their names were released,
We do that with all claims of.
even in an executive session.
Yes. Because the only time you wouldn't do it is if you're affirmatively bringing litigation, so you're hiding the fact that there's a litigation about to be filed. But if you look back at the select board agenda items, when we talk about litigation in executive session, generally the other side knows, so we would only be hiding it from the public. So when there's claims that are being discussed in executive session, we list them out. That's requirement of the open meeting law in this specificity requirement. one thing about the idea that they were only named, there was nothing public from June through November, when, the investigation was going on. When the report was released to the subjects, we told them it was a public record to give them fair warning. We did not publicize it. Like we did with the report with Chief Gonzalez. In that case, we had pending public records requests being asked of us, so we put it on the web. We did not do that here. We didn't have any inquiries. So the only way it became public is the subjects made a claim, which is totally different than an investigation.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go to one more person who has not spoken. Danelle, I'm going to you now, and then I'll hit some of the others who have spoken before. And we'll bring this, but Danelle, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Harry. I'll be brief and I will be careful. So, so as a little clarification, I guess one of the, first and foremost, we had to retain an attorney because the investigator had a relationship with town council. So for that to be ignored, no conflict of interest, filled out for that, and it's kind of wild to me. I want to know if the $30,000+ went to council's wife's friend. That'd be ridiculous if that happened. So that money could have gone other places. That altogether it was like $50,000 that we spent to defending ourselves and the claim to investigate us. Waste of money. So unfortunately, Chaz, there's been a long history, at least 18 years from my lived experience, and it's been proven, I have proof, that the executive branch has retaliated against the legislative branch. Started over with me with the footbridge over Route 9. So I've seen more than 3 administrators. I've seen more than 3 DPW commissioners in my time service here in this town. The issue that we have that everyone has been saying is, yes, investigate. We dig it. Policy is the policy, but it's not the law. Okay, so yeah, investigate, but have the state do it. Don't hire someone that's close to the administration to do an investigation, or it's not fair. It's not a fair investigation. So we had the lawyer up. So I'm gonna. Been a long history of this. I mean, I'm proof of it. I'm still here to talk about it. Thank God. But it's been a long history, and yes, some policies need to maybe change into bylaws instead of just policies, because this needs to stop. It affected my life. I've gotten more than just threats. My whole life changed over that footbridge, the Gateway East. Okay, from executive branch disapproving of how I voted. So moving forward, last year we were told not to speak about this. The 5 of us, we were told not to speak about this at town meeting. We did not. So you weren't the only one that was quiet about the situation, Chaz. So let's make that clear. That day the photograph was taken, it was over research, and we did not delay the workers. Actually, Chaz had a private event that was happening that same day that the sanitation workers were not late for, and delayed work operations for everybody for the DPW, water, park, and highway. So we have an issue. There was an issue because when the sanitation came up, Janice said it clearly. You know what? We're getting rid of a whole section of a department. Like, that's unheard of. We don't do that. And we went early. I said this before. It was raining. I left here at 5 o'clock in the morning. Made sure we didn't delay anybody from work. We want a town property. both the highway yard in here and the dump. So all I want to say is, Chaz, you could have said no. It's your authority. I was on that committee that was looking for new administrators, and you popped up. I was hoping we were going to get something new, not something old. But we got something old. So I'm going to say more at town meeting. I'm going to leave it at this, but it is, you guys are threatening how we operate as a town. And you could have said no, Chaz, from jump. There was a conflict with the town council from jump with the investigator. Y'all should just had to go to the state, investigate, but make it go to the state. I'm not going to say anything else. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Harry. I hope my colleagues are hearing and listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Danelle.
Can I respond to the accusation that I have a conflict of interest?
Yes.
I do not. And objectively, I didn't even have an appearance of a conflict of interest. However, I still disclosed it. The fact that Margaret Paget was hired, Margaret Paget is one of the top employment lawyers in Massachusetts. She's a super lawyer. She's actually a Brookline resident too. So I specifically hired her for that because you guys complained that I'm not, but I did hire her for Brookline attorney. Yes, she worked with my wife. Yes, I know her because we both go to one of the 7 law schools in Massachusetts. However, I disclose those facts. It's not a conflict of interest because I have no financial interest in Kirkett and Paget. My wife is the managing partner of Sharon and Lodgen. So no, I don't hire Sharon and Lodgen because I would have a conflict of interest if town of Brookline money went to Sharon Lodgen. My wife's salary at Sharon and Lodgen is based on the revenue of Sharon Lodgen. That would be an actual conflict of interest. I've never done so. However, when my wife and Margaret worked together, they were both employees. They were junior partners. They were income partners. So even if I had hired Margaret, go back in time to 10 years when they were working together and I wasn't. But if I was here in Brookline in 2013 and Margaret was with my wife at Sharon Lodgen, I would have been able to hire Sharon Lodgen because they're both employees. My wife would not have had a financial interest in Sharon Lodgen being paid town of Brookline money because her income was not based upon the firm's income. So even if they were working together and I hired them, it still would not have been a conflict of interest. The fact that I know an attorney in Massachusetts that I hired, I would hope you want me to do that. I've been a government lawyer for 25 years, a municipal lawyer for 10. I've been in public service for 35. You want me to hire a lawyer I don't know? Who would that be? A family law practitioner in Provincetown? A divorce lawyer in Pittsfield? If they're any good, then I know them. That's why I hire them, because I only hire the best for this stuff. So the fact that I know an attorney and hire them, that's a conflict. That is absurd. That is what you want me to do. I only hire you the best.
Thank you. Neil Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Harry, and I'll do the best I can. Speaking of our budget, the advisory committee budget motion, I've asked Dennis to notice a reconsideration of the select board budget, and I trust that'll come up in due course. I routinely respond to inquiries from constituents, also from petitioners, and I reach out to staff. I reach out to staff that I know. I chair the Administration and Finance Subcommittee. More specifically, right, we have 2 ICE articles, anti-ICE articles on the warrant. I was asked specifically if we did business with Citizens Bank. I called Lincoln Heinemann. Right, I called him, right? Is that okay?
Yes.
Is that not? But so that was rhetorical. So the other thing that most of the people in this room know, I'm very active in social media. I defend the town, I defend the budget, I defend the advisory committee, I defend people who are just the subject of misinformation. As a result, there are some people on Facebook that don't like me, right? And they'd be more than happy with this all public, right? To just call up and complain and complain that I made a call, right? And usurped Lincoln Heineman's time and somebody else's time. And of all of those, I'm not calling town council's office. Are all of those complaints going to be investigated? Full disclosure, by the way, Elise, thank you for mentioning the candidate. Right, the candidate. So I happen to be that candidate's treasurer. He's the chair of his campaign finance committee. He's also a respondent, now claimant against the town. There are two members of that campaign finance committee. There's the chair, the candidate, and there's Neil Gordon, the treasurer. I was also client of town council's office. I engaged him because there was a complaint again about me, right? And I don't know how many sides of this particular case town council's office is on. That's a comment, not a question. Chaz, as I go down the list, you first cite this evening, again, the campaign finance law. And then when we sort of dissuade you out of that not applying, then you pivot, right? Thank you, but then you pivoted.
I strenuously disagree with that assertion. Thank you.
Well, so it's what I heard, right? It's what I heard. The comment that disturbs me, a comment that disturbs me, is the control over the investigation, where you say you walled it off, would suggest to me a blank check, because more than $30,000 was spent, and you didn't know it was happening, right? As I interpret your remark, you're better than that. And I know you're better than that, but I've drafted a condition of appropriation, speaking of moving forward, to control exactly that in the future. And we'll take that up too at another meeting. I don't want to say this, but I'm going to say it. And with all due respect, a term that I'm getting tired of using. I was watching the OCPF training as presented to the select board, and this was on campaign finance law, specifically as it related to the upcoming ballot questions. It was done at a select board meeting. I was watching it live, right? I don't need to name the attorney who was doing the training. He was black letter wrong. And I texted one of the select board members, right, to say so. And it was challenged at the meeting, right? And it was, oh, really, I'll have to look into that, or worse to that, I don't know, worse than the attorneys. It was black letter wrong. Basic black letter. This is the trainer. My goodness. Two more comments. From my point of view, you made the wrong call. Let's stipulate that you made it in good faith. Okay? You made the wrong call. To suggest that we can fix this in the future doesn't stop that, right? You caused real harm by making a call, stipulated in good faith. It caused real harm. It caused real monetary harm. There's no reason why you can't own that. You have to own it in the past. You can't fix that going forward. That doesn't help the folks who are out of pocket. And I think all they want is to be whole from out of pocket. Own it, Chaz, and let the select board own it on your behalf. That's what I'm asking for. Lastly, I served in the United States Navy. It's not a great surprise. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I cite it often. I'll say this. There are two kinds of chiefs in the United States Navy. There are really good professional chiefs, and there are by the book chiefs. That Venn diagram doesn't overlap at all. Discretion, right? The fortunate consequence of the law is discretion. That's the fortunate consequence, not the black limit.
Thank you. Christine Westfall.
To some extent, I'm going to echo some of the things that Mr. Gordon said.
Neil, you go.
Neil,
Mr. Gordon was my grandpa.
yeah, I'm having trouble with names, but I remembered the last name. Thank you. I'm doing the best I can here.
Me too.
two things bother me about this. You keep saying, Chaz, that you didn't have enough information. There's a concept in the law used with a legal practice called summary judgment, where you presume that everything that the plaintiff has said is correct. Okay, and if you had done that in this case, it still would have been a minor financial problem. That's just the reality. You know, if I assume that everything that was said was true, it was a minor financial decision. And going to the investigation, which turned out to be remarkably expensive, seems ill-advised. And part of that is 2020 hindsight. It turned out to be a lot more expensive than anybody expected. And I'll admit that. The other thing that has bothered me about this discussion is, and I think this is what Neil was getting at, was you seem to be conflating the use of discretion with the creation of policy. And so what I hear you saying is, well, I couldn't have done this because it would have created a policy. If you're using your discretion, it does not necessarily create a policy. It might make it a little more difficult for the attorney to defend in the future, but it does not create a policy. And conflating the use of discretion with the creation of a policy, I find very problematic, just from a legal perspective. And I want you to understand that. So when we talk about this and we talk about the fact that we expected that you would have used some discretion given the impact, the monetary impact of the violation if it was true. It also, you know, your response is, but it would have created a policy. Use of discretion does not create policy. And conflating those two, I find fairly appalling. Again, you know, I understand that precedent in this system sometimes makes cases harder to defend, but the use of discretion does not create policy. That is not how the law works. And if counsel is telling you something else, I need to have a conversation with counsel about that. And that is also part of what this discussion is about. We're being told, well, I can't use my discretion this way because it will create a policy. That's not how it works. That's all I have to say. I think that's what Neil was getting at.
Thank
It
you.
creates precedent and practice. So if you want to say it's not policy, there, it's practice and precedent.
Thank you. Carlos, you had a question.
Yes, I had a quick question. So a couple times now, it's been referred as public spaces, and I'm having a hard time understanding what that really is. A few years ago, select board candidate took a picture of themselves and their family in front of the seal at the select board's room.
Yep.
That person claimed that it's open to the public. Now, normally that room is actually locked. But let's say it's open to the public. So the transfer station has a sign at the entrance that says the hours, Monday through Friday. Is a transfer station not a public space?
Transfer station is a public space.
It is a public space.
Yeah.
So it's the same as what Elise mentioned before, where that picture was taken in a public space. So, but originally it was mentioned that this town meeting members use their position to get to a space that was not a public space.
Yeah,
At least that's what I understood. So let me finish. So so there's no difference between that picture to being taken at the transfer station or that picture being taken on Washington Street.
I would say that's okay.
Sorry?
I would say that's okay. This was not
I
public land. That's not a space that the general public is allowed.
Is select board room and space that the general public can go in?
What's that?
Select board room.
So
It's a school a space where the general public can go in.
So if you want specific fact patterns, we can get into it, but I understood the area where that photo was taken is not available to the public. So we have this issue with like First Amendment law, traditional public forums, limited public forums, non-public forums. We have to deal with it for First Amendment auditors, and actually came up in the ICE debate. All of this is public land, but not everyone is allowed to be in every place in public land. So you're allowed to be in the lobby of town hall. You're allowed to come into the lobby of my office. You're not allowed to come into my office. That is
Because there's a door.
non-public forum.
Because there's a door.
Correct.
But there's no door at this transfer station,
I understood this was the yard where the trucks are parked.
which there's no gate. There's a gate at the beginning,
So
which is open.
I don't think everyone member of the public is allowed in the area. That would be a safety.
There's no gate.
Which is
There's
why
no
this-
sign that says no trespassing either.
Which was why this didn't come up, because we didn't clearly have an opportunity to say that that it didn't belong. What I'm objecting to is the idea that it's open to the public as everyone. I don't think that's true. You wouldn't want residents walking.
No, I know that, I mean, I agree that the transfer station may not be somewhere which should be open to the public.
Right.
But there's a sign that says, here are the hours, it's Monday through Friday. There's a gate that is open. There's no trespassing, the yellow gate, there's no sign that says no trespassing. And
Right, that wasn't an issue during this.
and employees only and all that stuff. So to me, maybe moving forward, there should be a sign that says, employees only, whatever it may be, except for during the Tuesdays on during that season. But
That's more of an issue now with the ice.
Yeah, but,
Which would be enforced.
but again, what's the difference between that, the picture that from a public space, or taking a picture of trash collection from Washington Street? I just think it's.
So there's three different things that you're, three different levels I see you talking about. One, your earlier question about the Pierce questions from last time around. I talked to Jonathan, and that was the issue that this material was created by town employees before the ballot question was created. So that was allowable information that was created by town staff that then people took from the public realm, public domain, and used for political purposes. Not allowed. There's actually a candidate who's doing that now with videos on his website. Not perfectly allowed.
Wait.
Okay. Then there's the issue of.
An employee was not, shouldn't have been allowed to, an
Can you
employee that should not have used that resource for a certain,
We're-
to take a.
Hold on, we're talking about Carlos's
I-
question before, that
Right.
the campaign in support of the override last time around.
Right, but
Not
again,
the superintendent.
we're getting campaign and non-campaign.
I'm trying to answer three different.
I know, but this really confuses me when
Let's take a step back. Can we take it?
Yeah.
Let's try and simplify this. Because I understand the law. The law says that if you are a public employee, you can't use public resources for political advocacy. That's the spirit of the law. That's the letter. The law says you can't use public resources for political advocacy. And what that looks like in practice varies depending on the situation. It's very situation. In this instance, the initial facts on the ground were we had potentially at least one public employee involved. We had employees posed facing the camera, some of them in uniform, materials with the PPW trucks visible in the background, smiling at the camera or what have you. And that picture was used in an argument in favor of a budget amendment. And specifically, I believe the language is, who will pick up your trash? It's these guys. And went on to say that if we only paid them more money, if we gave them early quits, et cetera, it was a political advocacy argument, which is fine. But it was the use of those people and that truck and their uniform to advocate for that position, a position which, as we said again, it was not clear to me at the time that this complaint came in that all of them or any of them supported or were told that their image was going to be used for this purpose. It's not, it's possible, right, that that constituted the use of public resources for a political purpose. That's my understanding of what the predicate is here. It's possible. And I think over the course of the investigation, the investigator looked into that and was able to determine for a number of reasons that that was not the case. That's the end. But in that moment, when all the information we have is that information, I think there's sufficient reason for us to look into that. And I take Steve's point, and I take Neil's point, I take everyone's point about what that should look like, what form that investigation should take. But again, to Steve's point too, honestly, I had thought that in bringing in an outside investigator to deal with this, it would have been a quick and efficient process. That's not the case. It's not what happened. But that's not what I intended.
Can I have a two-finger?
I'd really rather not.
Just a very quick question.
Well, we've spent this much time, go ahead, because otherwise we can argue all night about whether you
Just
can
a
have.
question to clarify. So what you're saying, it's not where the picture was taken, it was what was in the picture?
Thank you. So, I have withheld my comments till the end because I'd like to sort of wind this up. I noticed that in this 19-page investigatory report, which she goes into a great deal of detail, she doesn't seem to mention who the complainant was, nor in the 800 pages of anything. Is there any information on that? Now, I was wondering sort of why you asked that we include our email chain from a year ago. And I said, damn, I better read it just to see what I said. And you mentioned shortly after that photo circulated, a non-DPW employee verbally alleged to me that it violated the mass conflict of interest law, making specific reference to the finding from a few years ago that certain school department employees have violated that law by using school resources to advocate for a political cause, namely the Pierce debt exclusion. And then according to the Ethics Commission, it regards official capacity during working hours. Which I found interesting because it turns out town council raised that very same issue when he appeared for us within the last month. So apparently there's a number of people in town hall who seem to be interested in this conflict of interest law and political activity and tending to conflate the two issues. Because the case that town council referred us to regarding where the Anderson case was cited did not do what town council said. Town council had said Linus Guillory was eligible to distribute the information because it was policymaker, and that is exactly not what the political finance people said, the Office of Campaign and Political Finance. They said the opposite. They said even though Guillory may have been entitled to gather the information, he was not entitled to distribute it. So there seems to be a lot of misinformation going around town hall. But the real point I want to make, I sort of wind this up. We've said a lot of things tonight on both sides. I don't really get the impression that if we went back now, given what we know, a year, and somebody made a verbal complaint to you about this exact same thing, I'm not sure anything different would have happened. I really don't get the impression that you're saying, man, I wish I could do this over again because I wouldn't do it this way. What I seem to be hearing is I had no choice. Somebody complained, and you know, one of my questions is, do you judge who's complaining and what motive he or she might have had and how reputable they are before just taking the complaint and hiring a law firm for $31,000? Would you have done this differently, knowing what you know now?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Then I think we've made some progress. I'd like to continue that progress. Dennis, I filed a resolution with you a week or so ago, where basically, and if you could put it on the screen, or I can find it and I can put it on the screen. It's a resolution that basically says this happened, it was wrong, and the select board ought to reimburse these people for the $24,000 they spent on something for which they were found basically blameless and they were forced to lawyer up. And I'd like to move that and see if the advisory committee would agree to it.
It's a resolution.
It's it is a resolution of this committee that gets sent just to the select board that basically says, pay these people.
Second.
Harry, did you want to say anything about the resolution?
So with a bunch of whereas clauses of, whereas there was this investigation, it's the first whereas clause. Whereas five town meeting members acting as legislators tried to get factual information. Whereas the town has refused to release any records regarding the original complaint, and by that I mean the complaint itself. Because apparently it was verbal, oral. Whereas part of what was being investigated was rather violations of MGL's Chapter 268A occurred, which could have resulted in a felony conviction. Whereas this caused them to spend $24,000 on legal counsel. Whereas 4 of the 5 were completely cleared of the charges. Whereas there is precedent of the town settling claims where the amounts are small, but the potential for higher damages is, should it go to trial. Whereas the investigation could result in a potentially very large First Amendment retaliation claim by the 5 town meeting members. And whereas these actions by the town could result in a reluctance of residents to serve in Brookline's town meeting, as well as other volunteer boards, committees, and commissions, now therefore resolved. It being the sense of the AC that this entire investigation was unnecessary, mishandled, and has opened the town up to potential liability. The AC strongly recommends the relatively small claim of the 5 town meeting members for reimbursement of legal expenses be paid as part of a settlement resolving this matter.
So that's a motion, and I think I heard a second.
Yes.
Are there any additional comments by members of the committee?
Elise.
Just a parliamentary question, for newbie. Can we as AC members vote on this, given that our colleagues are involved in that?
I think we can. If I were one of our colleagues, I would not,
Okay, I'm just double checking.
but you're not getting any money out of this.
No.
Right, so I think you should.
Well, not only that, this is what Harry has proposed has no monetary impact whatsoever. It is a sense of the committee. So that gives someone like Elise 2 degrees of separation.
Okay, just double checking.
David Pollock.
But if we want to be really careful, we can disclose that we're advisory committee members.
So let's just assert that everyone has disclosed their participation on this committee when they vote, if they vote one way or the other.
That was meant humorously. What I like most about this is it could bring this debate and this long series of meetings to an end. I'm fabulously pleased with that aspect of this resolution motion. I'm not 100% comfortable with it. And I think partly it's because I haven't heard really anything from any advisory committee member in a really long time, over 3 meetings, just talking about the balance here. I've only heard a lot of speech that basically says, how could you have done this? It seems so obvious that this was a mistake. And I'm not completely comfortable with that. And I just am speaking now because I have heard just a moment ago and a meeting or two ago, a very real concern, financial concern expressed by town council about precedent. And when he first introduced that concern, he said, you know, that there could be scores of police officers saying, you investigated me and found nothing wrong, now pay my legal bills. And that resonates with me as a real concern. That if we, and here we are with such a level of privilege, asking the select board to make whole hours, you know, the people around this table. So I'm a little uncomfortable about that.
So I would say in response that when a complaint goes against a policeman, police officer, it's from a member of the public, presumably goes through some process. This was an in-town complaint. This is by somebody in town hall making this complaint, not against a police officer, against legislators for legislating, for looking into the matter regarding the sanitation thing. These legislators were found to be free of blame. And I think when you look at the policy, which is, this does chill. I mean, I have to say that if something came up, you know, a year from now to privatize road paving or something, I'd be damn reluctant to fight it because of what happened to the people who fought it this year. I'm not going to rip my neck, spend thousands of dollars on legal fees to do that. The police officer has union backing him or her up. I think it's apples and oranges.
Anyone else?
Well, and we,
Janice?
yes, so, and in the town, we actually do have a complaint process that we set up with DEICR. I mean, there is a whole process. But there is actually nothing, I looked at the complaints that are in there. It does cover actually police complaints, but it doesn't cover advisory complaints. You know, it doesn't cover us or any category kind of similar to us, other people on volunteer boards. So, yeah. But
I think
this
it's because it's policymaking.
yeah.
It's happened because people were taking actions on a certain policy position.
Anyone else?
But I would leave out mismanagement.
Well, I'll just add to what Harry said, that because I'm thinking the same thing you're thinking. That why would I want to put my head out to sort of advocate for something that could get me in trouble? And if that's the case, then why am I here? And that's, I think, the real reason that comes down to is, and I think I said this last time, it feels really sort of Trumpish in that, meant it or not, by doing this, the people who are legislating feel threatened by the people who are in the executive branch, and there shouldn't be. You know, it should be separated. And if that's the case, then I don't think I want to be part of the legislative.
Dennis, that seems to be the comments.
All right, then, let me just paste. Yes,
No.
I'd like to
One
leave
moment,
out
Lisa.
mismanagement because I think that Chaz was,
I-
I'd like to leave out mismanagement because
It's one of the whereas. Where is it in the document?
yeah,
Did somebody put the document back up?
I don't think it says mismanaged.
no,
The resolve clause said
well, maybe not the result.
unnecessarily mishandled and has opened the
Okay.
town up to.
Oh,
Miss Handle,
Miss Ham,
do you feel the same way?
I personally. What?
So do you feel the same way about Miss Handle being removed?
Well, I do feel Chaz was in a difficult situation about how to deal with complaints that get investigated. But certainly they've been exonerated, so yeah, that's my personal.
Well, my advice is that if you disagree with the language of this resolution, that would be an indication that you would vote no.
Oh,
What would it read?
And that if you agree with it, you would vote yes. That's
No,
typically how it works.
Where is Ms.
if
Ann?
you have a consequence,
So,
because my whole
entire
issue with this is
investigation was
people, there are
unnecessary.
complaints
and it's
filed
the town
because
up
of
to the-
policy decisions that people make. And just as Carlos doesn't want to be in the legislature anymore, if there's a risk of it, I think there's a reason to protect people who are found to be innocent if they have been formally accused primarily because they took a different policy position. So
So is that an amendment?
that's my amendment. Yes, okay.
I,
What would it be?
I'm not surprised.
Take out- Well, I don't. I would just take out, wait, what, I don't.
Miss Handle.
But Ms. Handle does not include just the town administrator. The other people in town council's office be involved as well, but I think Ms. Mann.
And town staff. but-
Yes, I think that was apt to put it in there.
So then
I
how would
think-
you describe it? Is there another word that you think would better?
Well, I
articulate-
can't read.
It's in there because my point from day one, when I spoke to Jazz a year ago, was that send it to the ethics commission. That's what they're there for.
Exactly.
Right, but not if consistently these things have been investigated by outside counsel. It would
If
be,
you want to propose that, that's fine. I will not accept it. As a friendly, I'm not accepting it as a friendly amendment and the committee can vote on it. I think the whole thing was mishandled.
Okay, so not only that, being that it is 8:53 PM and no new information has been presented in quite some time. We have a motion from Harry. I couldn't tell if Elisa had made an amendment to strike.
I don't know how to change it. I would prefer.
Here it is. Yeah, it's coming.
Can I comment while?
In that discussion is.
This is a non.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Well, it's done.
Chaz, thank you, because what Chaz told us, if he had this to do over again, he might have done it differently. If that, I don't read, that's a fact, right? And I don't read mishandled, right, in a pejorative context when we have the town administrator saying, I handled it one way, but if I had it to do over again, I would handle it a different way. I think that by definition is mishandled.
And your verdict?
There's no sanction here for these alleged mishandling.
I would also.
It's very hard to hear remotely. I apologize. Is there an amendment? Because I want to move on to votes.
This was handed out to people over a week ago. You received it in an email. This is not a surprise if you looked at it.
Okay, I don't hear an amendment, so I'm moving forward to a vote. If you want to make an amendment, going once, going twice,
There's no appetite on that.
great, thank you. We're voting on the motion that Harry handed out as read and debated. I'm just going to start in the middle so that we don't always have to start with Michael Berger. Elisa Jonas, yes or no? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Right, random is
Wait,
random.
can we just repeat what it is we're voting on?
We're voting on a
Wasn't
resolution
it handed out?
of the advisory committee that basically goes to the select board that says, please settle
For
this by
reimbursement.
paying these people
Okay.
the 24 grand.
Great, okay,
We did it with Stanley Spiegel.
yeah.
That went
No,
to the
I
town
just wanted to reiterate that publicly. Thank you.
Should we also then, sorry,
No. We're
Say anything
we're
about it.
voting.
Janice,
dropping that there's no.
He's called your name. Dennis has called your name.
You're voting now.
Mine?
Dennis.
Oh,
Janice.
yes.
I'm sorry, Janice.
Yes.
Brian Ladd,
Yes.
Alec Lebovitz,
Not here.
Not here.
Carol Levin,
Yes.
Liz Linder,
She was in and out tonight.
okay, Pam Lodish,
She is not here.
Jocelyn Murphy,
Excuse me, abstain.
Donnell O'Neill,
Thane,
Linda Olson Pelkey,
Yes.
Fran Perler,
Yes.
David Pollock,
Abstain.
Carlos Ridwejo,
Yes.
Margaret Robotham,
Yes.
Lee Selwyn,
yes,
Christine Westfall.
Oh, what the hell? This is like throwing bad money after, good money after bad, but yes.
Michael Berger,
Yes.
Harry Bors,
Don't think he's here.
I think he has, left.
Oh.
He was here.
he was here. Cliff
He's not
Brown,
on the list anymore.
Let's not here.
is Cliff here?
No.
No,
Elise Couture Stone,
Yes.
John Doggett,
Don't think he's
not here.
Harry Friedman,
Yes.
David Mark Goldstein,
Yes.
Neil Gordon.
Yes,
Oops, hang on. Neil Gordon, Susan Granoff,
Yes.
Perry Grossman,
Not here.
Kelly Hardebeck.
Yes.
All right, I think that's everybody that was in attendance. So I will take that motion and turn it into a memo, send it to the town administrator who already knows it's coming. And the select board. So thank you to everyone. Thank you, Chaz, for attending.
Dennis,
Yes,
are we voting on legal's budget tonight?
that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going. I was allowing Chaz to leave if he wanted to, however, because he doesn't have to sit through the budget hearings. He generally doesn't. But that was the next motion as we had tabled the legal department's budget. And as I recall, you had proposed recommending favorable action on the budget as submitted originally.
I had originally proposed that with the option of when we discuss budgets, holding open the possibility of reducing legal's budget, in my mind, by the amount of the investigation. If they have that kind of money to burn, they don't need it in their budget. But for tonight, I would propose a favorable action on legal's budget as submitted.
yeah, Dennis,
And that Yes.
similarly pending is the proposed condition of appropriation, which I think would need to be noticed separately.
Yeah, so what's the, can you elaborate on that? I'm sorry.
The condition of appropriation, which is not in final draft, would condition the spending on an investigation involving any member of the legislative branch. So the moderator, the advisory committee, town meeting members, members of CTO&S, or any member of any board, committee, or commission appointed by the moderator, and then separately including the town clerk. I think that's the list. All of those folks who are not subject to and don't report to the select board. So the condition would be, I can't, without restricting the executive's authority, that there be no spending for such absent a vote of the select board following public hearing.
All right. I mean, obviously that's not on the agenda for tonight and would have to be discussed later when we're looking at the conditions of appropriation in general.
Dennis,
yes,
Carlos has a question.
go ahead.
I'm sorry for asking the question today, but since this is all fresh in our mind, I just wanted to ask the question to town council. Because the town administrator, when I asked him, if at one point or during the investigation, there was like an amount or a milestone of, how much have we spent and where are we with it? And should we keep on moving forward or not? Which is sort of the question I had. And your answer was no, you didn't know about it. You just let it happen, which I think is appropriate. I have a similar question to town council, which is when investigations are happening, do you keep track of how much something is costing so that at the end, the cost of doing this investigation and the litigation and all that is higher than what one would have expected or received? Because you've talked a lot about how you settle things so that it's cheaper to the town. And it's just that idea of settling things so it's cheaper to the town and then investigating, like, are there points where you say, okay, this is not going anywhere, or I've had enough of the investigation to see where this is going, and we're already at this amount of money. I think throwing more money at it would be would just be inappropriate. So can you just say a little bit about that?
Sure, it's a yes, but we don't do it. We watch expenses. For example, you think that 31,000 is expensive, and before I got here, we spent $150,000 on just one investigation as part of Amy Hall's multiple complaints. How we handle that though is then we don't go back to that investigator. So I wouldn't want to interrupt an investigation because they're supposed to be independent because the investigation is costing too much or taking too long. All the investigators I know, we work with them on a schedule. This is important. You need to get this done quick. They'll tell me, sorry, I'm too busy. So we have clear expectations from our investigators about timing and cost. If they don't live up to those expectations, we don't rehire them. But I wouldn't want to ever be in a situation where we're in the middle of an investigation and then say, you spent too much money, I don't want your conclusions. Part of the expense here was when the investigator reached out to the subjects in June and tried to set up something in July, there was a lot of going around in July and August, and some interviews were canceled. They were told they were going to come and they didn't. So our investigator was prepping for an interview and there wasn't. Around September, she was ready to conclude the investigation without the cooperation of the subjects. So we were almost done. At that point, the subjects got a new attorney and all then came forward to be interviewed. So that's why it went from September to November. So I wouldn't want to be in a position where we're in August and say, okay, we've spent enough. Now the subjects come forward and say, okay, well, we'll be interviewed. And we say, nope, we spent too much money. We don't want to hear you. That's not a good way to conduct an investigation. Plus, you might want at the end to say, hey, we give it to the subjects and the subjects say, hey, you didn't interview these 3 people. We wouldn't then go back to the investigator to say, we were hearing that it wasn't complete, so you need to go back and do more work. So I never want to be in a situation where we're in the midst of investigation and say, we spent enough, we don't want to go forward. The remedy is you never hire that person again.
Okay. I'm glad that I'm not a lawyer because in architecture, I mean, the fees are what they are. And if you you had clients that, that didn't know what their fee was gonna be, and you just did it all the way, it's all or nothing, I don't know, it's a whole different world, but so when you, so before the investigators came forth, when you were at that October, I mean, that August point, did you have enough of an investigation to know if this was going anywhere, or was it already seeming like this is not going anywhere?
So the investigator may have done that, but she doesn't communicate that to me.
So the only,
What at that point was, I'm not getting cooperation with the subjects. I've emailed, I've done whatever, and then they say, is that enough? And then I say, it sounds like you've tried enough. Okay, you don't have to interview them. You emailed, you've set it up, all that stuff. You sound like you've given them a chance. So you can wrap it up. She would have wrapped it up without the input of the subjects. So just the other people that were interviewed. That's not ideal. We do have that in some investigations because it's hard to compel people to cooperate. So there are investigations where we don't have witnesses that come forward. There were witnesses that didn't come forward in this one too. So, you work with your investigator to get to a point where, like, are they comfortable enough that they try enough? And then they'd say yes and say, show me. Okay, I've sent 3 emails, I schedule it. Like, yeah, that sounds good enough.
you don't get updates throughout the
Hey,
investigation.
Carlos?
Oh, yes.
I'm trying to figure out where this is going tonight as it relates to voting on the legal budget.
Yeah, well, I guess it'll be what Harry said after, that very condition, reconsider it.
Right. We're going to debate that though, at a later date.
Yeah,
We're not debating that tonight. Yes.
I'm not clear on one thing. If we're going to ultimately consider a condition of appropriation, then why don't we table the budget until we can do both at the same time? You said we can't do that tonight because it's not on the agenda, and I understand that. But it seems to me that adopting a budget that is ultimately going to be conditioned without doing it at the same time is a little backwards. So I would move to table it pending a discussion and vote on the condition of appropriation.
I will accept such a motion.
Dennis?
Yes.
Or Harry. Can I just point out that we're losing time really fast. It's getting really close to all the deadlines. I'd like to vote on this tonight, and then we can reconsider it at a later date if we want to change what we do tonight. That would seem to be more effective than tabling it again. If we vote something tonight and we want to change it, we'll reconsider at that later point. But everything's getting really compressed right now.
Well, we've just passed a resolution urging the select board to deal with this in an appropriate way. And it seems to me that we need to hear their reaction. We need to discuss condition of appropriation, perhaps based on that reaction, and then deal with the legal department's budget comprehensively. And I just think that's the appropriate move at this point. I didn't hear anything tonight that gives me any more confidence in voting for the legal department budget than I had a week ago.
David, in the interest of time, can we vote on the motion to table, please?
That's, if you can let me speak. We are going to take a vote on the motion to table. If it passes, we will bring this back. If it fails, we're going to move on to a vote on the budget because we have at least 3 other items on the agenda for tonight. We have talked about this particular topic for 2.5 hours. So there's a motion to table town council budget. I assume there was a second.
Second.
I'm gonna start from the top. Michael.
No.
Elise.
I don't know. I'm sorry. Abstain. I don't know what I'm voting on.
Motion to table.
Motion to table the town council's budget. Harry Friedman.
No.
David Mark.
No.
Neil.
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
Kelly,
No.
Elisa,
No.
Janice,
No.
Brian,
Yes.
Carol,
No.
Dennis, Pam has entered the meeting.
Pam,
I'm abstaining.
Lotus.
I just entered.
Jocelyn,
Abstain.
Donnell, Linda,
Yes.
Fran,
Yes.
David,
No.
Yes.
Carlos, Margaret,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Christine.
No.
And was there anybody else? I think that's everybody, other than maybe, I think Liz is left. All right, so pardon?
Danell appears to have left.
The motion to table fails. We're gonna move on to a vote of, I'm sorry, yes,
8 to 9 to 3.
8 to 9 to 3. Favorable action on fiscal year 27 town council budget of, and I don't have the number in front of me. Do you have it, Neil or Lisa? Or Joe?
Momentarily, Dennis.
Or Charlie?
Sorry, I just wasn't prepared, but I can pull it for you.
It's all right. I mean, you're not like waiting with bated breath to answer every possible question we might have?
I will put it in chat in just a second.
All right.
It's one. Sorry. 1,149,990.
$1,499,990.
$1,149,990.
$1,149,990. All right. Michael,
Yes.
Elise,
Yes.
Harry,
Yes.
David Mark,
No.
Neil,
No.
Susan,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Elisa,
Yes.
Janice,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Pam,
Abstain.
Jocelyn,
Abstain.
Linda,
Yes.
Fran,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Carlos,
No.
Margaret,
Yes.
Lee,
No.
Christine.
Yes.
Okay, so by a vote of 14 in favor, Lisa, 4 opposed and 2 abstentions, our recommendation is for favorable action on the fiscal year 27 town council budget of $1,149,990 with the caveat that at a future date, Neil Gordon has indicated an interest in revisiting either this budget or the general conditions of appropriation for the warrant article 8 as a whole, to add conditions of appropriation, assuming that those are can be drafted appropriately, that would be meaningful. And that Harry has expressed an interest in potentially discussing this as we review some of the other requests that we've had for minor amendments to other department budgets. All right, so thank you to everyone. Thank you, Chaz. Thank you, Joe. We're going to move on to warrant article 16. I think Linda, you had an update for us.
Can I just briefly say thank you to the committee for your time and for your consideration and for your comments. All of them, I appreciate your honesty and your forthrightness in this. I will take your request to the select board and we will get back to you. Thank you.
And actually, if I may make one editorial comment, I tried to refrain from saying anything during this discussion. Because I didn't want to try to have any kind of finger on the scale, but Chaz made an observation during his earlier remarks in which he said that in response to feedback that he had gotten from myself, from Harry and others, he had endeavored to engage in new practices that involved preemptive outreach to myself, to Harry, to subcommittee chairs and the like as events materialize that might be of relevance to our either financial or oversight considerations. This was partly, driven by the discussion that we had over a year ago about the DPW budget, and he has followed through on that commitment. And I wanted to thank you publicly for that.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Chad.
I would like to say I'm going to continue joining the meeting, but virtually. I'm going to head home. I have a brief that's due next week, so I will be multitasking, but I won't just be including here. So if you have any questions, I'll be available by video.
The sad thing is, we'll still be going by the time you get home.
There's a possibility, yes.
Thank
you.
Okay, all right, thank you. So Linda, take it away.
Okay, so you want to hear about Article 16 after all of that?
I didn't say that. I just said we would hear about Article 16.
Well, I mean, I wrote a report. We discussed it at length. We had a public hearing. We had plenty of comments. So I think people should know at least what this is, right?
Right. Yes, I was sorry. I was just trying to be funny.
Okay. Well, warrant Article 16 is another instance of an individual property owner bringing a zoning change directly to town meeting. And I have in the past indicated that I think this is really dangerous for the town. I think it is a bad practice. And just use your imagination and think about your developer and you see this easy path and you start flooding town meeting with multiple proposals that could be anything, anywhere. And then you kind of maybe understand my existential terror about this. So anyway, but what this proposal was to change a parking lot owned by Nordblum, where they are using it as a surface lot. They rent to people in the neighborhood. It used to be associated with Pelham Hall. Pelham Hall sold it off, or actually Nordblum sold Pelham Hall. It is currently zoned as multifamily with a floor area ratio of 1.0. So there is a by right zoning opportunity to put housing on that site, but they have chosen not to do that. There was a previous proposal taken to the planning department to have a 4-story building on their parking lot, and the planning department told them that they would look more favorably on the proposal if they included more affordable housing above the inclusionary zoning limit or more climate resiliency measures in terms of open space. But they chose not to do any of that. So they brought a warrant article that was very, very minimal. They wanted to change it to a 4.0 FAR with a maximum height of 85 feet. What the M1 is 40 feet as a maximum height. They held one semi-public neighborhood meeting. I was not able to attend that. I've talked to several people who were there, and there was a mixed reception. And the impression that they gave was that they were very willing to listen to the neighborhood and wanted to dialogue, but that clearly wasn't the case. Instead, they did this. Some town meeting members in my precinct circulated a petition that was in opposition to rezoning in this manner, and 204 people signed it without very much work. And it began at the planning board, and there were a lot of letters written, both in favor and expressing concerns. So the big concerns were it's usurping the comprehensive planning process, that there were 3 very large projects being proposed for a very, very small area, and that many felt they needed to be looked at collectively. There were people bemoaning the lack of parking already in the district. The people who rented there, they had concerns. There was basically no real provision for open space or tree canopy or anything on the site at all. And it turns out that putting together the warrant article, they made several huge errors in their interpretation of the zoning bylaw, which I think Polly would tell us that she thinks that's why they cut it. We'll never know the real truth, I guess. There had been a referral motion drafted. That was what I was going to propose in the subcommittee, but we never got a chance to vote for that. And traffic at that intersection of Beacon and Pleasant is just a huge nightmare, and that was brought up by many of the public commenters. And the people who supported it were simply supportive because they feel we need more housing, and this was an opportunity to get that. So I guess that kind of sums it up. I'm wondering, what am I supposed to propose when present, excuse me, at town meeting?
A town meeting, where you're gonna, you may not have to speak at all because the moderator will say there's no motion being moved.
Yes, okay. So the only other tidbit I'll give you is we have heard via the planning staff that they've been told they want to bring this back in the fall.
So you've already written your report and you're in good shape. Right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I've already written a motion.
So if Polly is still here and wishes to add anything, this would be a great time to do that. And then we can go to any hopefully brief questions about a motion that's not going to be moved. But if Polly, if you're here, we'd be happy to hear from you.
Yes, I am here.
Thank you for your patience.
Well, I guess I was surprised by Linda's comments because the petitioner is not going to move this article. And the only comment I would make is that the way the rules are is that if you have 10 citizen petitioners who live in Brookline, they can submit a warrant article. When I first started in this job, which was a long time ago, it was 100 citizen petitioners. Not that you couldn't get that, but it did make it a little bit more difficult. And town meeting changed that to 10. So it's really, town meeting has the power to decide really who and how many people can submit a warrant article. But there is going to be no motion by the petitioner. And it seems to me that we could discuss the pros and cons of this if it ever does come back. I'm happy to answer any questions.
David Pollock.
Yes, so first, Linda just didn't finish by saying what subcommittee's recommendation is.
Right, yeah, we voted no action, 5-0.
Yeah, so and we thought I thought it was important to hold a public hearing so that advisory committee could take a vote to recommend no action, to just close the door on the fact that it could still be moved theoretically by somebody else.
Yeah, because technically you can actually not withdraw.
You can't withdraw an article, right. So I did want to just add one sort of piece of color to something Linda said, which was that the petitioners made a bunch of mistakes in what they proposed, which I don't think is really telling exactly the story, because what the way this worked was the owner or the petitioner or whatever hired an architect to design a developer proposal, and it's a max proposal. It sort of balloons up and fills up the site, and it encroaches on the setbacks, and you know, it's a sort of, and I think that we have a pretty good understanding that almost everywhere, and certainly in Brookline, this is what developers do, is they come forward and they ask for the moon, because that's a great place to start, because then they can say, oh, we're compromising as it comes down. So it's not, and the point is that what they drew for a building wasn't what they wrote in their zoning proposal. But that doesn't mean they necessarily made a mistake.
No. that's
They,
not
they
right.
just put two different things forward. Anyway, that's my.
Well, no, I mean, they thought they were in the Coolidge Corner Business District where the parking had to be counted there, but they weren't. They asked to be exempt from many other provisions in the zoning. So and I will also add that the neighborhood organized, and we asked multiple times for meetings with the developer, and were told that, no, we're okay with the town meeting process being the arbiter here. And that's my beef, is town meeting. I mean, it becomes like a beauty contest. And it's not about getting the right zoning or the right development in that spot at all. It becomes, I mean, leaving it up to, you know, I have a policy view one way or the other is not how you do good planning and zoning work, in my opinion. So I'm actually actively, anybody who can think of a way to prevent this from happening again in the future, please suggest a warrant article for me, because I want to be able to stop it if possible. I'm really not willing to just accept, 10 signatures. I mean, last time when it was the 10 signatures, it was neighbors of Jeffrey Allen's who signed it. They probably didn't know anything about what the proposal even was.
I think it was neighbors of the owner of the developer, a Brookline resident who was developing the two.
Yeah, it was up, yeah.
Not of the lawyer. Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying here. I think a better process, but I do also think being mindful and getting through the comp plan process where we actually embrace the zoning that's in place and feel that it's appropriate throughout town makes it much less likely that town meeting would change, would go for a change.
I brought a warrant article not all that long ago.
I remember.
To try and make it 50 for specials.
Yes.
We can't change the annuals. 50 for specials, and advisory committee scaled it down to 25 because 50 wasn't gonna make it, and then 25 didn't make it either.
Yeah, I remember the argument.
So,
Hey, how about a motion?
make a comment, which is, I think this is fascinating. And I don't mean that sarcastically. I think it is fascinating. And if this were now 7:30 instead of 9:30, I could listen to it for another half hour, but it's 9:30, and I think we need to move on.
Is there a recommendation from the subcommittee?
There is.
Yes.
Yes, a recommendation of no action.
No action.
And so that's gonna be, I think I heard the subcommittee just make a motion of no action on warrant article 16. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to anyone who wishes to recommend no action on warrant article 16 as recommended by the committee will vote yes. Michael,
Yes.
Elise,
Yes.
Harry,
Yes.
David, Mark,
At the risk of getting a complaint from Jeffrey Allen and being investigated, yes.
Neil,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Elisa,
Yes.
Janice,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Jocelyn,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Fran,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Carlos,
Yes.
Margaret,
Yes.
Lee. I didn't hear Lee. Christine.
Yes.
All right, Lee, if you're there, let me know your vote. Otherwise,
He is
it's
not here. He is laughing.
okay. 20 to 0, no action on warrant article 16. We can now move on to the building department. Thank you, Polly. Thank you to the subcommittee. We can move on to the building department budget. Is that you, Carol?
No, that's gonna be Carlos.
Okay. Is that you, Carlos?
Yes, let me just.
I think.
One sec.
Liquor. No success so far. Yeah. We had them open. I said.
Yeah, definitely that one. I mean.
So, the capital subcommittee met on 2 times, one time for, the budget hearing and one time for the CIP on March 23rd and March 25th to review both the building department budget and the CIP, the building department CIP. By a vote of 6-0, the subcommittee voted for favorable action on the building department's budget request of $13,056,742, which is an increase of 4.5 from the fiscal year 26 budget. Wasn't ready today.
Coffee, anyone? I've got a Toblerone.
So a lot of the increases in the building department are salary, which is $101. $1,000. Services was $50,000, and then utilities, which is the largest increase, which was $414,000, and basically due to increase in cost of electricity.
So that's all town buildings?
This is town buildings and school buildings. The town, the request does not include the $30,000 prior year cut. And also a 3% inflation increase, and then contractual services for with 3 to 5% of cleaning contractor. But the department did receive the standard 2.5% annual increase. One of the salary increases is the inclusion of a non-technical or non-licensed HVAC. One non-licensed HVAC technician, but the additional $150,000 salary increase is for a new licensed plumbing position. And Charlie Simmons spoke about the vacancies in the departments. One building inspector position is open, which they're advertising and hiring and interviewing. One licensed plumber position. Sorry, that's the one that's being interviewed. One licensed plumber position is been advertised and interviews are underway. And then 3 licensed HVAC positions remain unfilled, which is a continual challenge for his department to fulfill their job. And then one of the reasons, basically the reason for the vacancies is the difference between a private market and municipal rate for those kind of jobs. Municipal rate is 85,000, and in the private world it's 110 to 125,000. Unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to increase the allotment for those for that position because it applies to several different staff across the same grade due to union requirements. Our building department permit the building inspection. One of the inspectors has recently left to be a commissioner in a different location. And the permit volume has come down about 9% over the last year. So 300 versus 272 permits to date. The larger developments the larger developments that could happen next couple of months or a year would obviously increase that work. Unfortunately, our commissioner, Dan Bennett, is going to be retiring at the end of June. So we thank them for his work in town, and we wish them for best of luck in his new life in the retired world. The department had requested a new vehicle, but this was cut from the budget. There's more discussion later on about the schools providing an option for that. We asked Commissioner Bennett regarding some of the larger projects in town, for example, Waldo Durgan, and nothing. There are no news about Waldo Durgan, so that's still not happening. And then we also discussed some of the upcoming special town meeting articles for Chestnut Hill West, the project. In the second meeting, we also discussed the capital items for the public buildings, which includes several capital and maintenance initiatives, beginning with HVAC investments, which includes now the HVAC enhancements, which is sort of a higher level of maintenance. And some of the projects that are included in this section is the replacement of the Coolidge Corner Library HVAC and the town hall HVAC replacement. There were other projects like access control servers and rehabilitation projects such as gym ceiling repairs, painting across multiple buildings, elevator panel replacements, flooring and carpeting updates, full lighting improvements, and other of the such. Charlie Simmons submitted a memo to the Expenditures and Revenue Study Committee, requested the $1.31 million in ongoing annual operating funds for the new Pierce School, which is driven largely by higher costs associated with larger and more complex old electric design. This includes approximately $625,000 for utilities, which is an increase of about $400,000 $84,000. And $775,000 for repairs and maintenance, and about $600,000 for repairs for the more about $600,000 increase due to more complex systems. Additional funding for staffing, and especially in energy management personnel. It was discussed that a lot of the new buildings have much more complicated management systems. And as we add more of these systems, the overall system becomes more complex and more difficult to manage with the personnel that he has. The capital, discussing the capital, which is the building budget.
We skip it, or we can discuss it, and we're not voting on it.
Okay. Well, the capital improvement plan that was discussed, we have the utilities and solar initiative, which I think we should probably discuss when we look at the capitals. Today it's a little late. And other sort of projects, like, for example, the transfer station rebuild, and the school's main CIP, which is repair and maintenance, or fixing a lot of the school buildings. The committee discussed the funding gap of the school building repair and maintenance budget. In fiscal year 27, the request of $3,943,000 compared to town allocation of $3,633,000, which is an approximate gap of $310,000, which results in a prior year results from a prior year temporary reduction. So regarding the vote, again, regarding the budget, the subcommittee voted 6-0 to 0. 13,366,742,000.
Thank you. Carol, did you want to make some comments?
Yes, thank you, Carlos, for doing that. So I just want to make clear, we voted what you saw originally in the budget book, 13,056,000 and change. And then on further conversation regarding the shortfall in the PSB funding, we took a second vote last week, and we raised the building department budget to compensate for the reduction in the schools and the PSB's funding to the building department. And that's the higher number that Carlos was giving you. So our final recommendation is for a higher number that's in the budget book. And what we're proposing is that come out of the school budget that we're going to hear next week. And Administrator Carey had a plan originally to use a hoped for windfall in the amount of local aid coming from the state. There's a difference between what the governor proposed and a higher amount that the legislature is talking about. He was originally proposing to give that, come back to town meeting in the fall to give additional money to the building department. What we're suggesting is instead that the money be taken from the school department allocation in the spring now, And then that additional monies, however much it is, should he expects it'll make up this full 310,000 be appropriated back to the schools in the fall. And the reason we want to do that is because the schools repeatedly, historically, use the repair and maintenance budget as a source of additional funds. When you look at the school budget and you look at their budget book, the only thing they have for facilities is cleaning. They don't have all these repair and maintenance things, but they spend an awful lot of time going over Charlie's proposed budget, looking for ways that they can reduce the amount that is taken out above the line before they get their allocation. So that's why we are recommending this approach.
Thank you. Dan, did you want to add anything before we go to questions?
Yeah, just a few highlights. So, one of the concerns that we had is the repair and maintenance over the last few years. There were cuts by the school department in order to balance their budget. They cut our budget, which had never been done before. So last year they did that, and they did not provide the funding that Charlie asked for again this year. So, but I do appreciate the fact that the subcommittee went back and revoted and is trying to allocate that 310,000 back to us to make up for the cuts, inflation, and other things that we had. In addition, the town on the override side, they have $150,000 in there to make up for cuts in repair and maintenance and hiring a new plumbing inspector. We did ask for vehicles. I think both vehicles on the town and school side were cut. With respect to the positions, one positive out of some of this is that the school department has agreed to fund 2 unlicensed HVAC technician positions. Charlie had done this 2 years ago on the town side, and we tried to get the schools to come along, and for a few years they chose not to do that. We do believe there'll be a savings at the end of the day here, and so they're unlicensed HVAC techs, and they'll do preventative maintenance, belts and motors and filters on the school side, and we got the other person doing the town side. We do have a few more positions open since we had last met. We've got the OPM for the fire stations that the current person resigned. In addition, we have the strategic preventative maintenance coordinator that we're looking to fill. So we've got some positions that we are in the process of filling, and hopefully, however this override and things move forward, that will not impact the building department. With respect to building permits, I did run some numbers again before tonight's meeting. We're around 5% off now, so it seems to be picking up a little bit. I'm just kind of monitoring that because January, February were slower than I've seen in the past. So I did have some concern, and that's what resulted in the 9%. So we seem to be picking up, which is about normal because we're getting to spring and more appropriate construction time. On the other, side, the schools, for whatever reason, have chosen not to. Charlie did send a memo to the expenditures and revenues study committee, which we sent also to the superintendent and to the deputy superintendent of finance, indicating that the Pierce School is going to need about $1.3 million in additional funding to get that school up and running and operating. It's not till FY28, so maybe they can do something in FY27 or during FY27 for FY28. But we will be severely underfunded when that building opens, and trying to operate and maintain that building as well. So those are a couple of other things I just wanted to highlight, and I want to thank everyone for their time tonight.
All right. Any questions or comments from the committee?
David Mark.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to lose you, Dan, but I'm sure you're glad that your blood pressure is going to be going down on a daily basis. I have two
Yeah.
questions,
Thank
revolving
you.
in the library. I took a tour of the library, late last year. And in the basement, in back of the rabbit's hole, or whatever they call it, there was a closet where there was a bad leak. And I was wondering if that was the leak with the mold that you just dealt with, a week or two ago.
Charlie can answer that question
It
specifically.
actually wasn't. That leak has been fixed in the closet in the rabbit hole. This is another leak going through the foundation in the front of the building. And that has been fixed, so.
There seems to be a lot of them at the library. When I was looking at that, there were also two columns that looked like they were partially crumbling and the pieces had been glued back in, which kind of disturbed me. But what I want to ask next is that at that first leak, there was a water sprinkler that was really, really rusted from the leak because it was coming down. And I saw a couple weeks later a news story that there had been a massive recall of sprinkler heads from a company many years ago, and most people did not realize that there had been a recall or that they even had them installed. So I was wondering, do you carry records of what company sprinkler heads we have and whether it was subject to the recall stuff? Is that anything that you would be able to look into to see if they had been recalled and we never had them changed out?
Yes, I can do that. But it's actually in the code that you're required to do certain testing with a certain percentage of them. And if they fail, you have to replace them all. I prefer just to replace them all after so many years, 20 years. But I do have a list, and I can get a list from our sprinkler company that does all the testing.
Okay, because I was just wondering, because it looked like that sprinkler head in particular was not going to be working well if there was ever a problem, and I wasn't sure how widespread that problem was. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, in addition, the sprinkler systems and fire alarm systems get inspected annually by an outside fire alarm company, and those reports get sent to Charlie's office and the fire department under NFPA regulations.
Thank you. I know it's a very technical question, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
I have the next question. This is probably going to be the hardest thing you've ever faced in your career. 3 of us showed up at town hall at 6 o'clock tonight and could not get into the building.
We were late.
The people who were in the building appear to have fobs, which the 3 of us on this committee did not have. So my questions are, is it now policy that the building is locked after hours? And if so, how do we get in? And if not, why is it locked?
Well, I can answer that.
Yeah, Charlie can answer that. Yeah.
Yeah, if there are no meetings at town hall, yes, the doors lock at 5 o'clock. We
Okay.
have a new software package that we've been having some trouble with, and it is causing conflicts in schedules. We've been working on it. I'm shocked that the door was locked again. It should not be. And I will continue to work at it. It is getting better. I can say that. The new system went online in February. So we're working out all the bugs on it, but we should be really close to getting it corrected.
Okay, so I will note that there was at least one meeting scheduled for 6:30. It's this one. There were people in room 103. I don't know if their meeting started before 5 o'clock or not.
There were 3 meetings scheduled today, beginning at just a sec.
Margaret?
Yeah, I would just say I've been locked out 3 times. This is my 3rd time being locked out of this building, and the other 2 times I had friends inside to let me in. So I just, to your point around you're surprised that it happened, I was not surprised because I am accustomed to beating on the windows like a crazy person.
And I would point out that while I wasn't the 3rd time tonight, it was the 2nd time tonight for me. If you could look into this and I think assume that Monday through Thursday nights, there are meetings after 5 o'clock. I'm not aware of any night there is.
Yeah, Charlie, you might hang a file by the.
Well, I will let everybody in. I am looking into it. There's a meeting scheduled on Monday, and I'm having all my staff and the company there to go through this line by line to figure out where the error is, and it will be corrected. I promise you.
Thank you so much. Janice Kahn.
Yes. Hi,
We all need folks.
thank you, Harry, and good luck to you, Dan. You know, all good wishes for you.
Thank you.
So Charlie, I've got questions about these schools that we're building. Can we have a little bit of an update? How's Driscoll doing in terms of your ability to keep it maintained and and are there any surprises that you found so far with the systems there, or is that loaded?
Well, we're handling it. It is very complicated. It's something we've never had before like this. It's all electric. As Dan mentioned, there's a lot of points in the computer to watch. What I'm surprised is it was about 10 degrees below zero one night, and the building holds its heat extremely well. We're getting the heat from the ground, and I'm really astonished at how well it works. We're able to heat the building in the coldest weather, and the water temperature is only 130 degrees, which typically on a gas boiler or an oil boiler, the temperature of the water is about 180 degrees. So it's the design, new insulation, new state-of-the-art HVAC equipment. We have been able to find companies to maintain it. We haven't had any problems so far, and everything is going well. And we're just about ready to get solar panels plugged in. They've been installing them over the last several months.
Great. Well, that's good to hear. So maybe that'll be good news for Pierce too, when that comes online. So why is the extra, I thought that our energy costs were going to go down with ground source energy. No?
Well, they're going to be less than air source. And I haven't actually gone through all the numbers yet. It is promising. I can't give you any numbers right now today. However, I have to point out, there was one night it was extremely, extremely cold. And the way the program is written, if the water temperature coming out of the ground is less than 50 degrees, it turns on one or both of these electric boilers, which are extremely expensive to run. And they started. So I'm making some corrections to try to avoid that next winter. That made our electric bill jump up, say $5,000, just that one event.
It's a question of tweaking the system to get it right. So that's an experience curve, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. I can say it didn't happen the year before. It didn't get that cold. It's just, this has been a strange winter. Very, very long, cold, 3-4 days of extremely cold weather.
Yeah, it's been an unusual winter for sure. So, but that's good news that we're learning and school is doing well.
The electric heat that Charlie's talking about is a required kind of backup to the geothermal if you can't keep up. And it was good that we only had one experience with it, because anything more would be very expensive. But yeah, Charlie's guys will fiddle with the temperatures and when it comes on, and we'll be on top of that next time.
Well, good. Thanks for the information. Yeah.
Can I also provide one clarification? People get confused with this. These are very energy efficient buildings, which means it takes less energy to heat or cool a given size building than it would using the old construction methods. That says nothing about the cost of the energy that we're putting in or the cost to operate the systems.
Right.
So, the buildings are more complex because of these systems, so they cost more to operate and manage, and the cost of electricity is going up. And so we can't conflate the two, which I'm hearing frequently.
Yeah, that was one of the clarifications I think Charlie, either Simmons or Charlie Young made with our utility budget is it's an increase, but that's due to cost and not due to usage.
Okay, that's a good clarification.
Can I have a two-finger on this?
Sure, Linda.
Isn't it also true, though, that like we're heating and cooling larger spaces?
Yes.
So that can contribute to the increase as well.
Yeah, the two, the Driscoll School is bigger than the old Driscoll School. The Ridley is bigger than the old Devotion School. Every school we build is a bit bigger. Same thing with the high school. The STEM wing was bigger than the original wing. So we do have larger space to heat and cool, but the tightness of the buildings helps a bit with that usage.
Thank you. Jocelyn.
Dan, you can't see me because I'm tucked over in the corner, but I just wanted to say thank you. I had the pleasure of working with you for a number of years here in Town Hall and as a town meeting member. So I just want to say thank you. It was a really great experience for me and I wish you well in your retirement.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words.
David Pollack.
Yeah, so I just want to follow up on the operating cost and the geothermal and Janice's question, because I actually reached out to Charlie and to Alexandra Vecchio, our sustainability director, earlier this week, asking if they had any data on the geothermal performance and how much money we were saving. And Alexandra got back to us with 2020. And what I suggested was, can you give us a comparison of the performance, the energy cost on a per square foot basis to operate Ridley versus Driscoll? Because they're two new buildings, and to Carol's point, probably that's apples to apples, more or less, in terms of the energy efficiency of the envelope. And the news was very good, because I can't quote the numbers directly, but I think that she gave 2024 and 2025 numbers for each school. And the energy use for Ridley in one year was 0.031 and the other was 0.036 or something. And for Driscoll, it was like 0.021 and 0.025 or something. So roughly using 50% more energy, or Driscoll is using 2/3 as much energy as Ridley on a per square foot basis, and we haven't even plugged in the solar. So that, in terms of Charlie is always going to need more technicians and more highly trained and paid technicians to operate all this fancy new equipment. And he's not going to be able to hire them. So we're going to, as we know, he's going to have to get contracts with companies to come in and do that work because of the scale issue and everything. So the challenge is there, but just in terms of the also Ridley is mixed gas and electric. And we know that recently electricity has been more expensive than gas. So even then, this is a good, good leading indicator, call it that.
Thank you. Fran.
So I wanted to follow up on many of us, our inability to get into the building. Now, as a relatively new member of AC, I'm very jealous of the people with the blue cards that have been here before and all have key fobs. And I wondered.
Beth McDonald on the fourth floor.
No, I've asked 3 times and as recently as last month, and I've been rejected. And I've said that on Tuesdays when the select board is meeting, I can't even get a place to park on the outside lot. So my question is, why can't we, the new people, get the same key fobs?
And sticker for the car.
And a sticker for the car.
You got, typically, in the past, you were able to park in the lower garage, and there is no lower garage, and the upper garage does have town vehicles that park in it at night and department heads that still park in it. So if everybody in advisory parked there, there wouldn't be any parking for anybody else. So unfortunately, people have been parking
Why is that a problem?
on the streets if you could find anything. Right now, there is nobody from that I know of from advisory parking in the upper garage. They
Yeah,
should
my
be.
understanding too is the DPW is in charge of the parking and any parking passes, because even with the lower garage closed, all the employees have nowhere to park, so the DPW has a parking place, similar to what we do for teachers in all the schools. We have a pass that we put in the dashboard, and we park, we've got certain streets that we can park on around the neighborhoods within Brookline Village, then throw the Pierce and the contractors on top of that. And then all the meetings at town hall parking is a bit of a little bit of a problem, you know, these days, but you could talk to DPW. I think Sam Downs is in charge of that permitting, and if they could give them to the advisory that has, I think it's kind of, this is, I don't think you guys have met in a hybrid form. Is this the first year you're doing it in a little bit of time? So maybe the questions to ask either Erin Shute, you know, she could assist, or Sam Downs as the deputy engineer.
In previous years, I've had a little orange sticker, but their response is, well, the lot is free after 6, but sometimes we're here at 5 and earlier. And the other thing is, I just wonder how many department heads are there now? If our meetings start at 6 or 7?
I would imagine it depends on what department you're meeting with. So yeah, you know, I'm not there tonight. Obviously, I'm home, but that's something you might want to talk with Chaz about if you're looking to park in the upper garage.
Just very quickly, if you need a pass to park, you know, after hours, talk with Lisa, who will coordinate with me, and we will coordinate with the DPW to figure that out. They may have given some folks the answer that, you know, we can't give you a permit because you can park in the lot at, you know, from 6 onward. I didn't recall hearing about that. So, you know, let's resurface the issue if folks are having issues finding somewhere to park for these meetings. So feel free to reach out to Lisa, and her and I will coordinate to get you an answer.
Dennis?
Thank you, Charlie.
Yes.
Thanks, Charlie.
Were you about to say something?
No, all I was trying to do was call on Charlie a minute ago.
Any other questions from AC members? I think we're ready for a motion.
I'm
go
going
ahead,
to
Karen.
note that, given that this is the second largest budget that we look at, on a dollar per minute discussion, this was probably the highest dollar per minute discussion that we had.
Yay. Here we go.
See, Charlie and Dan, it was worth waiting till.
It is.
Always. But so the subcommittee moves the recommendation of favorable action of 13,366,742 $742 for the fiscal year 27 building department budget.
I actually have one question before we move it. The subcommittee had recommended that we wanted to put in a recommendation to somehow prevent the public schools of Brookline from tinkering with the building department's budget in the future. Is there any way we can work that into the motion?
I feel like this is something that's more for the town school partnership
Okay.
to discuss at some point in the future. And I think we're happy to get you an agenda item at some point. I mean, I can work on that.
Okay.
I would rather try to do that than come up with more complicated restrictions on the budgeting process. I would like to keep in our notes for our upcoming discussion what's the amount of the adjustment for the schools that's being proposed by the subcommittee?
It's 310,000 and I did alert Cliff.
Right, okay. Because we'll have to discuss that, be debating that and next week and possibly revisit all of this when we do our omnibus discussion. Okay, so there's a motion of favorable action on the building department budget of $13,366,742. I will share my screen as best I can. Michael,
Yes.
Elise,
Yes.
Harry,
Yes.
David, Mark,
Yes.
Neil,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Kelly, Elisa,
Yes.
Janice,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Jocelyn,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Fran,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Carlos,
Yes.
Margaret,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
and Kelly. Are you there?
He is no longer on the list.
Okay, 18 to 0. Favorable action on the amended building department budget of $13,366,742. Thank you to the subcommittee. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. And we can move on to, and best of luck, Dan. And then we're going to move on to warrant article 20. We have a subcommittee report.
Yes, that's Fran.
Okay, go ahead, Fran.
So given the late hour, I'm going to try to be brief, but I do respect the importance of this resolution. This is the 25th anniversary of the terrorist attacks on 9/11. And the petitioners pointed out that most people under 35 don't really have much of a personal memory of it. Up until this point, all the memorials were organized and funded by families and individuals, and as such couldn't even be listed on the town's event site. So this warrant article 20 is a resolution to try to fix those deficits. It asks the town to commit to erecting a physical memorial in honor of those individuals with ties to Brookline who lost their lives as a result of 9/11. And they pointed out that 9/11 is the largest terrorist attack death-wise in the world. Secondly, they want the select board to establish an official annual townwide 9/11 remembrance ceremony. And it further asks that the select board form a 9/11 memorial committee, advisory committee, to study and make recommendations and a report to the select board about the design, location, funding, and other aspects of creation of the memorial. And to have that committee or a separate growth of that committee be established to plan and coordinate an official town annual 9/11 remembrance ceremony. As a resolution, there's no authorization of appropriation of funds, and the petitioners did not discuss or detail how they envisioned the physical memorial because they wanted the committee and the town to have input into that. So I think that's the basis. If there are any questions.
Well,
Or Elizabeth is there.
Elizabeth, yeah.
Also our vote.
Great, yeah. So what's your recommendation? And let's go to the petitioners
Right,
also.
I have two more things to add. So the Human Services Subcommittee met on
Whatever.
yeah, whenever, on Tuesday. And they voted favorable action on an amended version of the warrant article, which the petitioners agreed was a friendly amendment, and the vote was 6-0 to 0. Subsequently to our meeting, the petitioners had some recommended changes by the moderator, and they wanted to add a sentence where they left out one of the planes that attacked on that crashed on 9/11 due to the hijacking, and a little clarification of one of the resolve clauses. And you should have received an amended amendment to that. That was not voted on by the committee, and we're asking the full AC to vote on that because the changes were extremely minimal.
Fran, is that what's read in the most recent update?
It's the freestanding document.
Yes.
That is not at the end of the report, but was a separate document in the agenda pack.
No, I'm saying there's an agenda pack that says amended HS subcommittee report to full AC, and that actually has two article. I just want to make sure that it's the section at the end that says that starts in red, voted that the town adopts the following resolution. Just want to make sure of that.
Yes.
That is,
Okay.
But one is clean and the other one is the edited version of that. They're both identical in substance.
right. So,
Okay.
Dennis, there's one that includes executive summary, voting yes, etc.
Nope. I'm looking at the thing that is just the warrant article.
Right.
Since they're
That is the last amended one that the subcommittee did not vote on, but contained those three changes. The moderator changed the titling part in the last line, and the petitioners added another plane that they had left out and clarified an awkwardly worded sentence.
okay. All right. Thank you.
Elizabeth, would you like to add anything at this point?
Well, just thank you very much to Susan and Fran and the whole committee for walking us through this and helping us get to you with a clean, much better version. And thank you for hearing this. And I want to introduce Ariel Gruzman, who's one of my co-petitioners. He's a TMM from 05. And the other two co-petitioners couldn't be on tonight. But if they were here, they would say, Jared would say, he who has a son at Lawrence, how important it is for children who never were alive to just know about 9/11 and what it meant. And we had people in Brookline who were incredibly gallant and heroic in their efforts. One person I think we're going to try to get to come speak to town meeting was Daniel Lewin, who was a neighbor of ours and was probably the first victim on 9/11 and understood the Arabic and tried to stop the hijackers who crashed the first plane. And he was killed and was probably the first victim of 9/11. And so we had firefighters who were from Brookline who lost their lives, went back to actually save people. So there's so many people who did amazing things that day. And not only were the firefighters and first responders doing their job, but they went back in knowing many of them wouldn't come out. And then there were just ordinary people who were on their way to work. And they did incredible things that day. So it's just a moment where, and I would say to Susan reminded us, it's a moment where people came together and really did what was right in America that day. And it seems like a good time to remember that and bring it forward on the 25th anniversary and really recognize that Brookline lost more people than any other community that we know of, except for Boston and New York. And actually per capita, we probably lost even more than Newton did. So it's a really important day. And we want to recognize all those Brookline residents and affiliated people who did incredible things that day.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go to questions. I have the first question. I read what I thought was the most recent version of this, and I was just a little confused about one thing. Is this meant to honor just people like firefighters and all, or is it also meant to honor just those poor souls who were stuck in the towers or were on the planes?
It's meant to honor, it's primarily citizen driven. And the firemen will always do the fireman solemn ceremony on 9/11, no matter what we do. But the citizens were not really included so much in that recognition. So it's to recognize Brookline citizens people who grew up in Brookline, who are affiliated with Brookline, who did things on that day. It's not just a generic 9/11 memorial, and it's not specific to the firemen and the policemen, even though many of them were heroes that day. It's really to talk about the people of Brookline who did great things that day, died that day.
Again, I'm a little confused. People from Brookline who did great things. So if
all the victims, all the Brookline victims.
okay, thank you.
All the Brookline victims. Yes.
And the
Brookline
committee would
ties.
define what the relationship to Brookline
Right,
is.
but what I'm trying to get at,
Everyone.
it includes people who are just in the wrong place at the
Yes.
wrong.
That.
Okay,
Yes,
thank.
especially so, Harry, especially so. Yeah,
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Jocelyn.
yep.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Ariel, for bringing this, and thank you for being here so late. I raised this question, Elizabeth, a while ago with you because I think I told you that I've attended many of these events on Babcock Street, and I've always found them incredibly moving. And my sense was this was something that was very personal to the firefighters who participated in that event. And so one of my fears was that they might feel as if their event had been hijacked. And you kindly said that you would reach out to them and make sure that wasn't the case. And can you confirm that?
Yes. And I spoke to the chief at length about this article, and he's very supportive of it. I think that he actually was the one who said, the firefighters are always going to honor the firefighters that were lost on that day, no matter what we do. And his point was that having it be a citizen-led effort and recognizing all the firefighters that died is really very positive and powerful. And so I think there's no intent here to get in the way of what the fire department does. In fact, we really want to just augment and acknowledge them. I mean, it's the more firefighters died that day than any other day in America.
Thank you.
Other questions? Dennis, I think we're ready for a motion.
All right, so because the subcommittee didn't vote, Fran, why don't you actually make this motion? We'll have somebody second it.
So I move favorable action on warrant article 20 as amended.
Second.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to vote on a recommendation of favorable action on warrant article 20 as amended. Michael.
Yes.
Elise.
Yes.
Harry.
Yes.
David Mark.
Yes.
Neil.
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
Elisa.
Yes.
Janice.
Yes.
Brian. Brian not here. Carol.
Left.
Yes.
Pam.
Yes.
Jocelyn.
Yes.
Linda.
Yes.
Fran.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Carlos.
Yes.
Margaret.
Yes.
Christine.
Yes.
We still have a quorum. 17 to 0. We recommend favorable action. Thank you to the subcommittee for reporting and helping to amend this. Thank you to the petitioners, and thank you for your patience. I know this is a very, very, very long meeting. Harry, you want to give a quick update on the schedule?
So we're meeting on Tuesday night. We're meeting hybrid, so we will be in this room. It's a 7 o'clock meeting. We will be doing warrant article 2 again, collective bargaining, because there are now some collective bargaining agreements. We'll be doing that as a public hearing. And then Dennis, as I understand it, we're gonna do, there's been a sort of a kink regarding free cash being certified by the state, which throws the CIP into distress. So we can't do the omnibus budget, but we can do the operating budget, the school budget, and the conditions of appropriation. Is that correct, Dennis?
Yes, and that includes the long-awaited, discussion of the so-called add backs that we've been debating. So that we will be a debate on the operating budget, a substantive debate on the operating budget, but not we won't be able to, as you said, we won't be able to complete the CIP discussion.
Right, and to amend my description, the free cash looks like it's coming in much lower, which is what messes the budget.
What about warrant article 9? Those votes we didn't do the other night.
Oh, yeah, we'll have to notice.
Warrant article 9 is being moved to May 7th, as is warrant article 11, as is warrant article 12 and 24, are all right now being moved to Thursday, May 7th.
Right. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Good night. See you on Tuesday.